Chapter 45-56. The Saint Lotus Seed was indeed the Saint Lotus Seed. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the flames had already reached the bottom of Su Ji's feet. As the flames passed, a transparent, sparkling, and radiant silver shell appeared in front of Xiaohua. The threatening aura of the shell was unobstructed as it tumbled in the air. The golden light around Xiaohua was unable to resist this aura and unconsciously retreated. He was already more than 100 miles away, and under the silver light, Xiaohua's figure was still moving further away. Boom! The flame fell under Su Ji's feet, turned into a lotus seed, and once again swirled towards Su Ji's head. In just a few breaths' time, the lotus seed flame had reached Su Ji's immortal mark. Swoosh! All the aura and brilliance of the flame converged into the immortal mark. Boom! Another ball of aura rushed out from the immortal mark and fell into the lotus seed flame. Boom! A stream of light appeared on Su Ji's immortal mark again. It was obviously different from before. The moment the stream of light disappeared, the light pillar that seemed to pierce through heaven and earth slowly shrank. The crack in the starry sky began to slowly close. Su Ji! Seeing this, Fairy Xingyu hurriedly rushed toward the light pillar. She urged, "Quick, this is our last chance to return to the immortal realm." But Su Ji replied. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. Clang! The lotus flames floating above his head condensed together and turned into a silver lotus seed. Su Ji moved his body into the silver light pillar. He looked up at Xiaohua and said in a thunderous voice, "Xiaohua, my divination skills are not wrong after all. You are indeed my savior when I return to the immortal realm. To tell you the truth, when I did the divination back then, I did not believe the result. If not for the holy lotus seed, I would not have returned to the immortal realm. And the holy lotus seed could not exist in the lower realm. At that time, I even thought that you could only help Xingyue. But I really did not expect that not only did you lead us through the starry sky maze and help us open the starry sky gate, but you also brought us the 5 zodiac tokens and the holy lotus seed. This Saint Lotus Seed not only saved my life, it also allowed me to step into the light immortal realm. Xiaohua, no words can express my gratitude for your great kindness. Whatever you say now is meaningless. Wait until you ascend to the immortal world, then we'll drink and chat merrily." On Su Ji's head, Fairy Xingyu was also very happy. She shouted, "Su Ji, congratulations on entering the light immortal realm." As she spoke, Fairy Xingyu looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Xiaohua, thank you. When you fly to the celestial world, I will also pour wine for you and Su Ji." At this point, Fairy Xingyu actually transmitted her voice again. "Oh, by the way, there seems to be some things in the Moon Embracing Palace that are useful for your return to the Dawn Rain continent. Of course, whether or not you can find it is not something I can know." "What's the point of pouring wine?" Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "You need to get drunk." "Hee hee." Fairy Xingyu covered her mouth and laughed quietly. Seeing that the two of them had flown to the edge of the crack, Su Ji raised his hand and the lotus seed condensed from flames turned into a stream of light and landed in front of Xiaohua. Su Ji transmitted his voice, "Xiaohua, this is transformed from my immortal mark. It contains my cultivation experience and imprint of my immortal mark. This is originally an item from the immortal world. I'll lend it to you temporarily to comprehend. It will be of great help to you when you ascend to the immortal world in the future. Remember, after you ascend to the immortal world, you must return it to me." Ah! Xiaohua saw that Su Ji rarely showed favoritism outside the law and even spoke vaguely. He stretched out his hand to receive the lotus seed and said, "Junior thanks Senior for your generous gift. I wish Senior's love is stronger than gold. I wish you 100 years of blissful marriage and a son soon." Boom! Following Xiaohua's congratulatory words, Su Ji's immortal body shook twice and fled into the crack of the immortal world in a panic. The crack of the immortal world closed with a loud bang. The entire starry sky shook a few times and then returned to normal. Holy Lotus Seed, Holy Lotus Seed. Xiaohua was really excited. The sense of accomplishment from helping someone, especially an immortal, was much stronger than what he obtained himself. Moreover, to be able to help someone who had helped him so much, not only for karma, but also for the beauty of the world, Xiao Hua felt that it was worth it. He tossed the lotus seed up and down and laughed inwardly. I really didn't expect that the ancient golden core in the void of the dragon domain would have such an effect. This karma was already formed on the dragon island. Then he looked at the lotus seed again. Where his gaze fell, endless lightning flashed and countless clouds lingered inside. It looked indescribably mysterious. However, Xiao Hua laughed again. I've already obtained the innate purple qi. There are countless mysteries of heaven and earth in it. Why would I need this item condensed from the immortal mark? However, if I don't accept it, how can Su Ji be at ease? Moreover, Su Ji's experience in this lotus seed is even more important. In the future, when I encounter a bottleneck, I will inevitably need it. Fine, fine, fine. This item will be my Fortune Gate's cornerstone treasure. With that, Xiao Hua sent the lotus seed into the Shenhua continent. Strangely enough, wherever the lotus seed landed, the immortal slaying stage fragment would release lightning, attracting the lotus seed to the side. Wherever the lightning struck, the lotus seed would release boundless clouds that shrouded the immortal slaying stage. Following that, strands of clouds slowly descended from the sky above the Shenhua continent, shrouding the entire Shenhua continent. Each strand of cloud contained the aura of immortal marks. Any Fortune Gate disciple on the Shenhua continent who was fated to obtain these strands of cloud would open a door to the heavens. In the future, these disciples' futures would be immeasurable. After putting away the lotus seed, Xiao Hua stretched lazily and muttered to himself, "Since entering the Star Moon Palace, I can be considered to have experienced life and death. Now, he could finally take a break. My trip to the Star Moon Palace is over." Thinking about it, this Xiao has also obtained quite a lot. Not to mention the clear feather pill that Senior Su gave to this Xiao, even the other 11 strange things are all useful. This Xiao will find a place to eat this clear feather pill first. His granny, even the Grand Mist Ancestor came to the Star Moon Palace. I feel uneasy. If it weren't for Senior Su, I definitely wouldn't have let that guy in so easily. If he dared to scheme against my Fortune Gate, how could I let him off so easily? Thinking of the place where he had taken the clear feather pill, Xiao Hua naturally thought of the starry sky. He raised his eyes and looked at the starry sky. The 12 star arrays where the 12 zodiac tokens had landed had already disappeared. Now, the entire starry sky was empty, and there were no stars flashing. Xiao Hua did not even think about it. He urged his body to descend. However, Xiao Hua was stunned on the spot after descending for 1,000 zhang. He stopped and raised his head to look at the sky. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself, the 12 zodiac tokens broke the 12 star arrays, and 12 jade boxes flew out from the star arrays. If the star arrays are completely broken, the starry sky will return to its original state, right? Not to mention, after the last jade box flew out, there was a mysterious aura in the space. Although that aura disappeared in a flash, it felt familiar to me. However, at that time, I was only focused on checking if there was a holy lotus seed inside the jade box. Moreover, the entire space was torn apart by the immortal world's crack, and that aura disappeared. Could it be that there is something strange in this space? Could it be that these 12 star arrays are just a cover? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's eyes shone brightly. He rushed into the space and released his divine sense to explore inch by inch. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua didn't find anything even after looking for half an hour. Because the space was like the vault of heaven, unreachable and boundless, Xiao Hua's divine sense couldn't reach it. The 12 star arrays were empty, no different from the void. Could it be that I was wrong? Xiao Hua frowned, or my feeling just now was wrong? A moment later, Xiao Hua opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye and scanned his surroundings. At this time, Xiao Hua's eyes were blurred. Bursts of stinging pain were transmitted to his mind from his eyes and into the mysterious dark clouds. Xiao Hua couldn't bear it. However, in his blurry eyes, except for the place where the golden light flashed and some fine time lines, the other places were completely the outline of a palace. There was nothing special. Seeing this, Xiaohua didn't hesitate to teleport straight to the golden light. Unfortunately, this space was really strange. Teleportation seemed to be inferior to flying. After half an hour, Xiaohua arrived at the place where the golden light flashed. Xiaohua looked at his position and then looked around. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The place where the golden light came from was a space covered by fine time lines. At this time, it was no different from the surrounding space. Xiaohua also tried Yuan Shen, soul consciousness, Buddhist consciousness, divine sense, and even the clear eye technique, but he couldn't see anything strange. Moreover, this space was only a few dozen miles in size. It was almost a drop in the ocean in the entire seemingly boundless space. He didn't know if Fairy Xingyu had the Dharma eye technique, but he believed that, other than Fairy Xingyu, among all the humans and demons who could enter the Star Moon Palace, he was probably the only one who could find the place where the golden light came from. Here, Xiaohua opened his Dharma eye again. Through the fine time lines, the other space that overlapped with this space was also vaguely revealed. The interior of the space was pitch black, and nothing could be seen clearly. However, there seemed to be a huge object covering the entire space. Damn it, what is it? Xiaohua closed his Dharma eye and rolled his eyes. What kind of aura makes me feel a sense of familiarity? Now that the 12 zodiac tokens are gone, how can this aura leak out? This is the law of time. It's not something I can break. Chapter 45-57. Thinking of this, Xiaohua showed a trace of hesitation. After a while, he narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, looks like I can only try this divine ability. I just don't know if this divine ability is effective against the law of time. After waiting for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Xiaohua once again opened his delusion breaker Dharma eye. Silver light flashed within the Dharma eye, and a beam of silver light shot out from the Dharma eye and fell into the void. Open! Xiaohua roared angrily. The void started to spin under the light beam, forming a whirlpool several feet in size. Then, spatial cracks appeared in the whirlpool. Unfortunately, outside the spatial cracks, inexplicable starlight appeared. Neither the golden light nor the aura appeared. Xiaohua's plan to use the law of space to break the law of time was going to fail. Break! Xiaohua roared again. His entire law eye, which seemed to be staking everything on a single throw, emitted an intense dark green brilliance. That silver beam of light also doubled in size in an instant, emitting a trembling sound. The void vortex below the beam of light suddenly deepened, and then a faint golden light flashed out with a schwa sound, followed by a wisp of aura rushing out from the vortex. However, the golden light and aura both flashed and disappeared. When the golden light appeared, the delusion breaker Dharma eye was in severe pain. Xiaohua could no longer hold on and hurriedly closed his Dharma eye. A layer of black luster rapidly appeared between his eyebrows. Ah! Xiaohua cried out involuntarily. The surprise in his voice far exceeded the pain of the Dharma eye. Isn't this the aura of the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper? As he spoke, Xiaohua raised his hand and took out the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper from the space where Taoist Master Yun was. Sure enough, when the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper appeared, the aura rushed toward the void. Layers of space collapsed, but nothing else appeared after the space collapsed. I understand now. Surprised, Xiaohua restrained his emotions and pondered, the law of time must be the fragment of the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper. So, I can feel the familiar aura from a different space. But the fragment is in another space. How can I break through the shackles of time? Speaking of Xiaohua's ability to break through the shackles of time, it was naturally the lightning evasion. Previously, Xiaohua had already tried pushing his lightning evasion to its limits in the Beast Enclosure and Mount Fubo. However, he was still a hair's breadth away from breaking through the timelines, and this hair's breadth should be an intrinsic difference. How could Xiaohua possibly break through it? Perhaps it wouldn't have worked before. A complacent smile appeared on Xiaohua's face. With a wave of his hand, a jade box appeared in his hand. This Xiao's magic power doesn't seem to be enough to support the lightning escape to surpass the fine lines of time. However, this Xiao now has the clear feather pill. Senior Su had made it clear that consuming this item required one's cultivation realm and a firm Dao heart. When I was fighting with Bei Xian, I had already fused all of my previous accumulations. Now that I lack time, this clear feather pill is naturally the best choice. And now, this Xiao wants to rely on magic power to activate the lightning escape technique to compete with the laws of time. Isn't this the same as using the medicinal effects of the clear feather pill? Wouldn't he be able to use the law of time to eliminate the hidden dangers of the clear feather pill? This Xiao is a genius. This is a way to kill two birds with one stone. Thinking of this, Xiaohua took out the clear feather pill from the jade box and placed it in his mouth. He held the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper in his right hand and activated his magic power. Suddenly, lightning appeared on the surface of his body. Xiaohua's figure moved, charging straight into the void in front of him. Lightning flashed around Xiaohua's body, illuminating the surrounding space. At the same time this lightning flashed, space-time resistance immediately appeared. It was as if a surging wave was surging from all directions, annihilating Xiaohua's entire body. There was no difference from before. Soon, Xiaohua's body began to slowly move. 4 layers of shadows appeared. Immediately after, Xiaohua's body turned into 1,000 feet of lightning. Moreover, the lightning became illusory, twisted, and broke into dozens of pieces. At the same time, the rumbling sound of thunder was also elongated, gradually penetrating deep into the void. The lightning suddenly trembled. Within the lightning, Xiaohua's body turned into 132 million illusory dots. These dots of light rapidly flew back and forth and gradually merged into the void. When only 30% of the illusory dots remained, Xiaohua felt that his body was empty. All of the illusory dots began to tremble violently. Xiaohua didn't hesitate to flip his tongue. The clear feather pill turned into spiritual liquid and fell into his body. Boom! The clear feather pill that fell into Xiaohua's body was different from ordinary pills. Waves of incomparably powerful medicinal effects were born from the medicinal liquid. Like a surging tide, they rushed into every part of Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly urged his cultivation method to refine the medicinal effects. The clear feather pill was really overbearing. Not only did the refined true essence contain immortal spiritual energy, but it also contained the mysteries of heaven and earth. This true essence entered Xiaohua's meridians and pushed Xiaohua's cultivation to the late stage of the Mahayana realm. On the other hand, it entered the scattered nascent soul, causing the scattered nascent soul to rapidly expand. Bursts of tiny purple lightning appeared in the void and tore the already extremely distorted void into pieces. Moreover, a powerful pressure was emitted from these lightning threads and spread in all directions. As Xiaohua's cultivation increased, this pressure also rose steadily. Looking at the 30% of illusory dots that hadn't merged into the void, they shook and formed shadows. The shadows were very slow, but they were very stable. When the shadows formed 9 layers, the sound of wind whistling began to emerge from the shadows. The remaining illusory dots also began to gradually merge into the void. After a while, Xiaohua suddenly felt that the void around him began to change. The more he urged the lightning escape technique, the slower his flying speed became. Everything around him also began to slow down. Xiaohua felt happy in his heart. He understood that he was already close to breaking through the shackles of time. Therefore, he accelerated the refining of the clear feather pill's medicinal effects. At this time, Xiaohua's starry sky nascent soul once again turned into a nebula. Strands of tiny lightning threads mixed with immortal spiritual energy flashed between these nebulas. The grand mist purple chi also had tiny cloud threads that slowly merged into the nebula. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was just a cultivator of the mortal realm. He hadn't even fully grasped the laws of space, so how could he break through the shackles of time? In the end, seeing that the clear feather pill's medicinal effects had been refined, Xiaohua still had half of the illusory dots that hadn't completely merged into the void. On that day, the void around Xiaohua also didn't completely stop. Damn it! Xiaohua felt the illusory dots shake again. His body was about to break free from the void. He couldn't help but curse. He knew that he was going to fail again today. At this time, the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper in Xiao Hua's right hand suddenly trembled. It emitted an intense golden light. Where the golden light landed, the void began to turn transparent. In front of Xiao Hua's eyes, the originally impossible-to-see timelines suddenly appeared. These timelines contained endless profound meanings. Previously, when Xiao Hua was comprehending the fragments of time in the heavenly prison, he couldn't see these profound meanings. When the timelines appeared, Xiao Hua's surroundings became deathly silent. It was as if everything in the world had stopped. Even Xiao Hua himself seemed to be unable to move. In the instant that the world fell silent, the golden light of the 10,000 extinguishing celestial dipper rushed into the fine lines of time and landed in another space. At the place where the golden light disappeared, a fragment and a crystal that looked like a cloud flew through the fine lines of time and landed in the gap of the 10,000 extinguishing celestial dipper. The moment the fragment fell into the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper, the golden light disappeared. The timelines instantly disappeared. At the same time, the still world moved again. The space that was moving slowly in Xiao Hua's eyes appeared again. However, this slowness only lasted for a few breaths of time. The entire space shook rapidly. Then, Xiao Hua's half of the illusory dots that had yet to merge into the void also trembled. All the small dots that had disappeared before appeared again. Xiao Hua's entire body flashed like a wave of water, completely revealing himself in the air once again. Just like before, bean-sized beads of sweat suddenly appeared on Xiao Hua's forehead. However, Xiao Hua didn't have the time to wipe the sweat away. With a sweep of his mind, he immediately stored the 10,000 extinguishing heavenly dipper and the cloud-like crystal into his space. Then he let out a long breath. He sat down cross-legged, his palms facing the sky, and began to meditate. Along with the activation of his cultivation method, thin threads of lightning appeared around Xiao Hua's body. These threads of lightning transformed into millions of vortexes. At the same time, Xiao Hua's starry sky-scattered nascent soul also flew out from his lower dantian. His entire body was surrounded by primordial purple qi. The brilliance of the stars and the moon that filled the sky was like a waterfall. It rushed out of nowhere and crazily landed on the scattered nascent soul and his body. As Xiao Hua's pressure slowly spread out, it made up for the deficiencies caused by the activation of the clear feather pill's medicinal power. The starry sky-scattered nascent soul also gradually expanded. In the end, it was as if it was going to cover the entire starry sky. After an unknown amount of time, the surrounding void began to give birth to a faint will of heaven and earth. This will quickly filled the entire space and fell on Xiao Hua's body like the water of the four seas. Xiao Hua's figure moved slightly, and the starlight that filled the sky disappeared. It seemed that the incomparably huge starry sky-scattered nascent soul also quickly shrank and fell on top of Xiao Hua's head. When Xiao Hua opened his eyes, he saw a river of stars flashing between his eyes. At the same time, lightning also appeared. Xiao Hua looked up with some surprise, as if he didn't understand the origin of this will of heaven and earth. Then he closed his eyes again and checked his cultivation base. After a while, he opened his eyes and thought to himself, Senior Su's words are indeed true. This clear feather pill is worthy of being a medicinal pill of the immortal world. My cultivation base has already reached the late Mahayana realm, and my starry sky nascent soul has also reached the end of the ninth tribulation. Moreover, this clear feather pill's residual medicinal power has not been completely refined. After refining it, this Shao can cross the tribulation at any time. The clear feather pill is so powerful, presumably other things also have similar effects. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua took out a few more jade boxes and carefully examined them. Inside these jade boxes, there were 3 colored clouds, 9 colored hills, flashing crystal dragons, strange colored bone flowers, and even a multicolored butterfly. Xiao Hua looked at them with a smile. His mind entered the space and called out Taoist Witch, Celestial Being, Demon Sovereign Sure, and the others. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, Taoist Witch and the others cupped their hands and smiled. Congratulations, fellow Taoist, for reaching the peak of the 9th grade of essence force. Chapter 45-58. Xiaohua shook his head with a smile and said, "What is there to be happy about? If not for the fragment of the myriad extinguishing heavenly dipper, I would not have taken the clear feather pill now." Taoist Wu nodded and said, "You are right. Fellow Taoist, you are now at the late stage of Mahayana realm, and still have the medicinal strength of the clear feather pill in your body. Perhaps you will ascend to the immortal realm after leaving Star Moon Palace. But we have yet to return to Dawn Rain Continent, and there are still many things we need to do. How can we leave now?" Reverend Yun looked at Xiaohua and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, you are overthinking. Do you think ascending to the immortal realm is an easy thing? Among 10,000 cultivators who have cultivated to the peak of the 9th tier of Yuan energy, it is impossible for one to ascend to the immortal realm. Furthermore, the closer one is to the end, the more difficult it is to cultivate. Although fellow Taoist has already reached the late stage of tribulation transcendence, it will take at least 1,000 years for you to reach the consummation stage." Sherfiend quickly said, That's right. Big brother, it's the same as when you used the lightning escape technique. The first 70% of your physical body can merge with the void, but the later 30% is much slower. If you want to merge the last 5% into the void, who knows how long you'll have to wait. Xiaohua looked at his clones and said with a smile, "Let's not talk about it anymore. In any case, I have made great progress in my overall strength, so we should not neglect it anymore." Then he pointed at the jade box hovering in the air and said with a smile, "This is a treasure I obtained together with the clear feather pill. If nothing goes wrong, it should be able to help you in your cultivation. Fellow Taoists, please take a look at it as it is what you need." Reverend Yun gave it a look, then grabbed it with his dragon claw. It was the glittering crystal dragon, and he said, "You don't have to look at it anymore. It must be I." The celestial frowned and looked at this and that. Finally, he grabbed the small 9-colored mountain with his big hand. He squinted his eyes and looked at it for a moment, then nodded and said, "This is it. Although I don't know what it is, the aura in it is very familiar. I think after refining it, my overall strength will catch up with fellow Taoist." Taoist which smiled faintly. Without any hesitation, he extended his arm and took the strange-colored bone flower in his hand. Like Reverend Yun, there's no need for me to look at it any longer. This thing is definitely mine. It's just that I don't know how helpful it will be to I's cultivation after refining it. Big brother, Demon Venerable sure was a little envious. He looked at the jade boxes on the left and said with a flattering face, "This 3-colored cloud has the aura of noble spirit. It must belong to Wenchu. That starfish has the aura of the power of the moon and stars. It should belong to Feng Wu. As for the bamboo that condenses the long river and the colorful butterfly, I don't know who would use them. However, little brother knows that all of this is useless for little brother's cultivation. I wonder if big brother has anything that I need? What else do you want?" The celestial put away the 9-colored mountain and shouted, "You should refine that demonic array's demonic spirit properly. It's stronger than anything else." Demon Venerable sure smiled and said, "Little brother knows that I'm being greedy. However, since all of you have gained something, you should let little brother be happy, right?" "Ah." Xiaohua laughed. He waved his hand and took out another jade box. "Don't worry. This palace's star array is very magical. There are all kinds of treasures from Buddhism, Taoist, Confucian, and Demon. How can there be no demonic array? This is for you." Demon Lord Sure received the jade box and opened it to take a look. Inside, there was a blood-red skull that looked like a crystal-clear crystal. Demon Lord Sherbujue laughed and quickly kept the jade box. He bowed and said, "Thank you, big brother. Little brother will devour this thing. I think I can take the last step." "Damn it." The celestial rolled his eyes and said, "Why do you want to take the last step? Could it be that you want to ascend to the immortal realm too?" "Hee hee." Demon Venerable sure laughed and said, "Big brother, you don't know. Little brother can also ascend. However, little brother is going to the upper realm Devil Swamp in the Devil Realm." "Good boy, you can also ascend." The celestial was envious and said, "If all of you ascend, where will I go?" Don't worry, fellow Taoist. Taoist which smiled and said, when we take the last step, we will naturally know. Moreover, at the very least, we still have Shenhua continent. When the Celestial heard that, he raised his hand and took out the 9-colored mountain and said, fellow Taoist, you are right. Then I want to see where I will take the last step. With that, the Celestial opened his mouth and was about to swallow the 9-colored mountain. When Xiaohua saw that, he hurriedly raised his hand and blocked the mountain. He smiled bitterly and said, fellow Taoist, don't worry. This is not a good place to refine treasures. If not for the fragment of the great extinguishing heavenly dipper, I wouldn't have taken the clear feather pill here. It's not too late to refine it after we leave the Star Moon Palace and find a place to cultivate. That works too. When the Celestial heard that, he kept the 9-colored mountain and said, that's right, the cloud-like crystal chip with the fragment of the great extinguishing heavenly dipper seems to be the secret technique to refine the great extinguishing heavenly dipper. I want to study it. Very good. Xiaohua smiled and handed the crystal chip to the Celestial. I'll leave it to you to study it. When the Celestial kept the crystal chip, Xiaohua said, fellow Taoists, you don't have to go back first. When I was passing through the platform earlier, I heard strange thunder. There seemed to be some strange words in the thunder. The sound contained the power of laws, and ordinary cultivators couldn't withstand it. However, when I heard it, it also sounded in my heart. I seemed to be able to understand it. Now that we have nothing to do, instead of waiting for the Star Moon Palace to close, why don't we listen to it and see what mysteries there are inside? Very good. The Celestial smiled and said, as the saying goes, unity of will is an impregnable fortress. We will also help you to study it. Unity of will is an impregnable fortress? Taoist sorcerer smiled and asked, this phrase doesn't seem to be appropriate here. Who cares if it's appropriate or not, I'll go listen to it first. Xiaohua laughed. His figure flashed and landed at the place where he came from earlier. The Celestial and the others followed behind him. After exiting the palace door condensed from silver light, they saw the greenish-white platform again. It was also as dark and cold as usual, as if everything that happened in the pavilion had nothing to do with the outside world. Even if a crack was torn in the immortal world, and the 2 exiled immortals had returned to the immortal world, they couldn't raise a trace of light in this darkness. Xiaohua and the others stood in front of the pavilion and looked around. There were also some light silhouettes in the shadows in the distance, but they couldn't see what they looked like clearly. A kind of heaviness and mystery came from afar. Xiaohua and the others passed by the light silhouettes and flew towards the platform. They knew clearly that the light silhouettes weren't something they could approach casually. After flying to the platform, Xiaohua and the others landed and waited quietly. Sure enough, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, thunder rumbled from high up in the sky. Xiaohua hurriedly looked at the Celestial, Taoist sorcerer, and the others. It wasn't out of Xiaohua's expectations. Their bodies shone with golden, blood-red, or gray-white light. However, their bodies were the same as Xiaohua's, showing no signs of exploding. Xiaohua breathed a sigh of relief and listened with rapt attention. That voice appeared in Xiaohua's heart again. However, this time was different from the previous times. The voice was abnormally blurry, and he couldn't hear what it was saying at all. Fellow Taoist. Just as Xiaohua frowned, the Celestial's body trembled and he cried out in alarm, This seems to be a cultivation method. It's really suitable for this poor Taoist to cultivate. Xiaohua's body also shook. He looked at the Celestial in disbelief and listened with rapt attention again. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't hear it clearly. He looked at the Celestial again and frowned as well. He couldn't help but walk toward the other direction of the platform. Fellow Taoist. Xiaohua reminded him, that place is not somewhere you and I can go. Without waiting for Xiaohua to finish speaking, the Celestial raised his hand, indicating for Xiaohua to shut up. His figure stopped, turned around, and took a few steps forward. In the end, he stopped again and said to Xiaohua, Fellow Taoist, this poor Taoist can confirm that this voice is talking about a kind of cultivation method that this poor Taoist can cultivate. But I can't hear it clearly from here. You can only hear it when you go there. As he said that, the celestial pointed at the outline of a light shadow outside the platform. How is that possible? Xiao Hua was puzzled. The thunder can only be heard on the platform, but it can't be heard after the platform. How can that light shadow be heard? Why don't we go there and have a look? Reverend Yun said with a smile. If fellow Taoist feels unsafe, we won't leave the platform. Alright. Xiao Hua nodded helplessly. He understood the celestial's feelings very well. After all, it was rare for him to come across a cultivation method he could cultivate. If it were him, he wouldn't want to give it up so easily. What he was worried about was that the celestial might not be able to hear it clearly when they reached the edge of the platform. Sure enough, when they landed on the edge of the platform, not only did the thunder not become louder, it became softer and finally disappeared. Damn it! Celestial Bujue roared to the sky. Are you kidding me? As soon as the celestial's voice died away, another thunder rumbled. However, this time, it was not the thunder that fell, but the same inexplicable sound. The voice rang in Xiao Hua's mind. Xiao Hua shuddered and stood there in a daze. Although the voice was vague, he could hear it clearly. The discussion about the cultivation method is about to begin. All divine sons are in position. The discussion about the cultivation method? Divine sons? Xiao Hua came to his senses and hurriedly turned to look at the celestial, Taoist sorcerer, and Reverend Yun. Obviously, they had heard it too, and their faces were filled with disbelief. After all, the Xingyue palace mentioned by Fairy Xingyu was an ancient divine object. How could there be an ancient deity in it? But if these voices were just illusions and were just one of the restrictive spells in the Xingyue palace, what was the use of these voices? Chapter 45-59. The Inheritance. Xiao Hua suddenly realized something. Reverend Yun raised his hand and pointed into the distance, saying, "Fellow Taoist, look. The silhouette over there is emitting a golden light." Xiao Hua hurriedly looked over. Indeed, within the pitch-black silhouette, strange silhouettes were lit up one after another, like lamps in the night. "The sons of gods are sitting there," the celestial muttered. "Could that be where Xian Hong is discussing the law? Let's go and have a look." Thinking of the inheritance, Xiao Hua's heart stirred. He flew up and waved his hand. After flying over the platform, in the time it took to finish a meal, some large silhouettes appeared in front of them. They were similar to the pavilions from before, but most of the silhouettes were shining with a golden light. Only a few of them were dim. All the silhouettes that were shining with a golden light emitted a powerful and unpredictable aura. Xiao Hua and the others could not get close at all. Xiao Hua could only choose a dim silhouette to land on. However, the silhouette was like a pavilion without any door. Xiao Hua reached out and touched the silhouette, but he felt a hard sensation. He could not enter at all. In the middle of the pavilion silhouette, there was a small protrusion. When Xiao Hua touched the silhouette, the protrusion flashed with a golden light, and a strange lock was revealed. When Xiao Hua's hand left the silhouette, the lock disappeared again. When Xiao Hua saw the lock, he immediately thought of the key he had obtained in the starry sky. He hurriedly took out the key and raised his hand to insert it into the lock. However, the lock flashed with a golden light and the key bounced off. This key is actually not the key? Xiao Hua was a little disappointed. Then, he took out the key he had obtained in the Yeqiong Heavenly Palace. Unfortunately, the key still could not be inserted into the lock. That's not right. Xiao Hua was depressed. He thought to himself, I obtained 2 keys in the Xingyue Palace. How can it not be the key? Could it be that these 2 keys belong to other pavilions? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. He looked up and saw that there was another silhouette not far away from the pavilion silhouette. He hurriedly flew over. This silhouette was even weirder. It looked like 2 inverted triangles joined together. Xiao Hua touched the outline again, and the place where the 2 triangles touched flashed with a faint golden light. Another strange lock was revealed. Xiao Hua hurriedly passed the 2 keys over. The light golden lock flashed with a golden light, and the 2 keys bounced open. Just as Xiao Hua was about to head to another pavilion, fellow Taoist Kuang reminded him, Fellow Taoist, Don't forget that you still have a key that fell into the spatial crevice from the dragon field. Xiaohua casually replied, "That's the key to the dragon domain, it can't be used here, right?" However, after he finished speaking, Xiaohua also smiled. Since the holy lotus seed could be obtained from the spatial crack, then perhaps the key obtained from the spatial crack could also be used here? Unfortunately, the key with the dragon pattern still bounced off the golden light and did not open the lock. Hee. Xiaohua waved his hand again and took out the key he obtained from the heaven and earth pagoda. He waved his hand and sent it into the lock. He smiled and said, "I have many keys, why don't I try them one by one?" Without waiting for Xiaohua to finish speaking, with a swish, a light sound rang out. The lock shone brightly, and the key engraved with dragon patterns actually fell into the lock. Along with the light, the two triangular outlines lit up. At the same time that the lock entered the outline, layer upon layer of dragon patterns appeared in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Xiaohua reached out his hand and pushed. The originally solid outline had already disappeared, and his hand sank into it. This is really strange. Xiaohua was overjoyed, but also extremely puzzled. This key came from the heaven and earth pagoda. It should belong to the supreme dragon god of the great desolate continent. How can his key open this pavilion of the Star Moon Palace? Could it be that supreme dragon god is the ancient almighty who refined this Star Moon Palace? However, Xiaohua could not think too much at this moment. Under the urging of celestial being, Xiaohua stepped forward and flew into the two triangular pavilions. Inside the pavilions was the ocean. The blue seawater looked like crystal, and layers of strong aura of the great desolate continent flowed like the wind in this seemingly endless ocean. As soon as Xiaohua, celestial being, Taoist witch, and the others entered the pavilions, the sound of thunder rang out again. As the sound of thunder fell, the entire ocean shook. Streams of indescribable principles emerged from the shaking and rushed into Xiaohua's body, stimulating the crystal-like divine spark and primal purple energy. The invisible golden light of the divine spark shot out from Xiaohua's body, connecting celestial being, Taoist witch, Reverend Yun, and Lord Archfiend. The principles vibrated the golden light and turned into profound meanings that fell into everyone's bodies. Just like Xiaohua, they could clearly hear the voice in their hearts. This time, Xiaohong will discuss the Tao of gods. Gods are almighty beings. Anything can become a god, no matter if it is a demon, a devil, a spirit, a human, a dragon, a sorcerer, or this. Xiaohua heard it clearly. Although he was greatly shocked, he also felt a little depressed. Damn it, I'm just a cultivator from the mortal realm. I haven't ascended to become an immortal yet. Why should I listen to the Tao of gods? If Senior Su hasn't returned to the immortal realm, I'll bring him here to listen to it. However, right at this moment, the voice continued, ordinary gods can only be regarded as demigods or even nihility gods. Even if they ascend to the divine realm of the great desolate continent and continue their cultivation, they can never become original gods, let alone incipient gods. This is what people in the three realms often say, gods are not achieved through cultivation. This is because in order to become an original god, one must obtain the words of a god, the chi of a god, the spirit of a god, and the body of a god before ascending to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. In the three realms, the cultivation of all living things is inclined towards one kind. Could be the words of a god, the chi of a god, the spirit of a god, or the body of a god. Even if there is a cultivator who can obtain two, if he obtains all four, there is not even one in a billion. Boom. When these words fell into Xiaohua's heart, it was like a sudden clap of thunder, like a sudden enlightenment. In an instant, Xiaohua's mind became clear. Without even thinking, he immediately sat down cross-legged and turned his 5 hearts towards the sky to listen quietly. The Tao of gods, even if he didn't understand it, he still had to listen. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The ancient great sorcerers cultivated the green seal script and obtained the words of a god. The ancient great scholars cultivated the inscription script and obtained the chi of a god. The ancient Buddha cultivated the golden seal script and obtained the spirit of a god. If a cultivator has these three, he can ascend to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. As for the body of a god, it is the primal chaos body after all. It is rare even in the divine realm of the great desolate continent. If a son of God wants to become an incipient god, he has to refine his body with the chaotic energy before he ascends to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. Even a demigod in the divine realm of the great desolate continent can hardly survive after falling into the chaos, let alone a cultivator from the lower realm. Therefore, in the divine realm of the great desolate continent, it is easy to cultivate the original god realm, but difficult to cultivate the incipient god realm. At first, Xiaohua's heart was still pounding, and he was even wild with joy. But later on, he became intoxicated. These words were not only the truth of the heaven and earth, but also something that Xiaohua would never be able to hear. Moreover, when these words fell into Xiaohua's heart, the heavenly Tao Xiaohua and the karma Xiaohua in the space were intoxicated. Countless profound meanings slowly flowed into Xiaohua's heart. As the words fell into his heart, the truth that was not easy to comprehend also turned into murmuring water. It was the same for Xiaohua, the celestial, Taoist sorcerer, Reverend Yun, and Shi the Exalted. Indescribable ripples were emanating from the bodies of the four clones, and dazzling lights were flashing from time to time. When they were intoxicated, the bodies of the four clones trembled at the same time. The celestial took out the small 9-colored mountain and slapped it on the top of his head. Immediately, the 9-colored light began to overflow from his head, slowly spreading down his body along with the words. Taoist sorcerer also took out the strange-colored bone flower, opened his mouth, and swallowed it. After that, his body began to tremble as well. Gradually, the trembling turned into a rhythm as he refined the bone flower. Reverend Yun and Shi the Exalted had also taken out the crystal dragon and the translucent blood-red skull respectively. Taking advantage of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, they began to refine and devour them. After an unknown amount of time, although the discussion was neither fast nor slow, Xiaohua could already tell that it was not a single existence that was discussing the law, but rather multiple existences. Some of the contents of the discussion were like sweet rain to Xiaohua, indescribably wonderful, while some were incomprehensible. However, Xiaohua was not dispirited. He only memorized what he heard, regardless of whether he would forget it in the future. Moreover, he also clearly knew that the heavenly Tao Xiaohua and karma Xiaohua had long since escaped from his space, turning into an ethereal place to carefully comprehend. The mysteries of these two doppelgangers were something that even Xiaohua himself did not know, so he also believed that the things he did not understand, these two doppelgangers would certainly understand. When another voice rang out, Xiaohua's spirit was shaken, and he once again focused his mind, for the words were exactly the secret that he could not find even after all the hardships he had gone through. The world began with the soul, followed by the 5 elements, and then came the strength. Therefore, the mystery of the soul is comparable to the heaven and earth. The strength of the soul is far stronger than the strength of the 5 elements, and is even stronger than the strength of the fleshly body. Every creature has a spirit, and their fleshly body is different. Be it a beast, a man, a wood, or a spirit, they all have different bodies, different cultivation methods, and different paths to becoming a god. But the soul of every creature is one. The essence is the same, but the form is different. Or, you can say that the grades are different. The cultivation of the soul is the engraving of the Dharma, which is the power of the heaven and earth. Only the cultivation of the soul can make all creatures equal. And only those who can control the strength of the soul can be called original God, and only then can they be qualified to step into the incipient God realm. Therefore, the cultivation of the soul touches the mystery of the heaven and earth, and harms the foundation of all creatures. Although one is an almighty expert, it is also a great taboo. I have traveled all over the immemorial world, read countless ancient secret histories, and found the mystery of the soul cultivation fragments. I have shared it with the sons of God, so they can comprehend it and see the heaven and earth. Chapter 4560. Taoist witch, who was sitting next to Xiaohua, trembled violently. His body glowed with an indescribable green light, which took the shape of a flower and began to bloom slowly. As the strange voice fell, heaven and earth Xiaohua and karma Xiaohua also sent some light threads into the flower, cooperating with Taoist Witch. At the same time, the green light around Taoist Witch rushed into Xiaohua again, as if some stamens were stuck on his body. The souls that Xiaohua obtained from the heaven and earth pagoda began to slowly fall into the flower along with the green light. The faint green light gradually grew thicker. By the time the voice finished speaking, Taoist Witch had completely transformed into the shape of a flower. The souls in the space slowly fell into his body in an orderly manner. The heavenly Dao Xiaohua and karma Xiaohua were also withdrawn from Taoist Witch's body. Immediately after that, other voices began to talk about the techniques one by one. Some of them were the techniques of Confucian cultivators, some were the techniques of spirit cultivators, some were the techniques of demon cultivators, some were the techniques of celestial being, and some were the techniques of fiend cultivators. In short, all kinds of mystic techniques that could lead one to become a god were revealed one after another. The celestial being, Reverend Yun, and Archfiend Shi were wild with joy. Of course, Xiaohua felt sorry for Reverend Thunderbolt, Feng Wu, and Wen Chu. But he also believed that with Heavenly Dao and Karma Xiaohua here, these meat pies that fell from the sky would definitely fall into their mouths, although they had already been chewed by 2 of his clones. Putting aside the fact that Xiaohua had obtained the biggest meat pie from Star Moon Palace and encountered one of the most important fortuitous encounters in his path of cultivation, there was a small fishing village in the southwest of hidden Immortal continent, near the East Sea. As it was already dusk, smoke rose from kitchen chimneys, and the aroma of fish wafted out from everywhere. Although the sea breeze was still blowing, it was very gentle now, blowing the aroma to the beach. The side of the beach was covered with reefs. Many children were either playing or busying themselves near these reefs. Wherever the tide passed, not only would there be a lot of prawns, crabs, and seaweed left on the beach, there were also marine creatures that were rarely seen between the reefs. The fisherwomen in the fishing village collected the shrimp, crabs, and seaweed from the beach and brought them back to cook, leaving these children to harvest between the reefs. I caught a big starfish. A thin child took out a bowl-sized starfish from a crevice and jumped onto the reef to show off proudly. On a nearby reef, another slightly chubby child said disdainfully, "What's there to show off about a starfish? Look at me." As he spoke, the slightly plump child took out a basin-sized crab from the bamboo basket beside him and said, "This crab is enough for me and my parents to eat." The thin child from before was a little tongue-tied, as if his self-esteem had been struck. He opened his mouth but didn't know how to refute. However, when he rolled his eyes, he hurriedly pointed at another child who had buried his head in the rock wall and remained silent. "No matter how big your coral is, it's not as good as the one salted fish boy picked up. I heard that coral can be sold for a lot of copper coins." Tisk! The chubby child immediately retorted, "I'm competing with you in terms of food, not in terms of value. The coral that salted fish boy picked up looks good, but who knows how much it can be sold for in a distant town." A big-headed fish picked up from the grass. "She can't even carry it herself." The thin child was anxious. He pointed at a short girl further away and shouted, "Hers is also better than yours." However, the thin child had only said half a sentence when he suddenly stopped talking. He looked at where the girl was and froze there in a daze. The slightly plump child naturally didn't hesitate. He looked up at the short girl and shouted, "Who said that?" However, the slightly plump child was just like the thin child. Before he finished speaking, he was already stunned there. Because where the thin child was pointing, there was not only the thin girl, but also in the west, where the sun was setting. Under the orange clouds, an extremely huge ship slowly floated over from where the tide fell. The ship was so majestic that it was the first time the slightly plump child had seen it in his life. He couldn't help but open his mouth and stand there in a daze, not knowing what to say. The ship floated extremely fast, far faster than the usual ships the children had seen. In just a few minutes, it was already close to the coast. At this moment, the thin child came to his senses and shouted, "I saw this ship first. It's bigger than the biggest ship you've seen. Until now, the thin child still hadn't forgotten to compete with the slightly plump child. Pig, I've never seen such a big pig. How many years will it take for my family to eat this? The slightly chubby child was obviously a little bigger than the thin child. He threw this kind of boring comparison to the back of his mind and opened his eyes to look at the big pig lying on the bow of the ship. His eyes flashed with a fervent light as he muttered under his breath. When the thin child heard that, he became anxious again and shouted, "I saw this huge pig first too. You can't fight with me. After my father slaughters this pig, he'll give you a tail." Ah? The voices of the two children were quite loud and clear. The surrounding children who were busy picking up the sea creatures all heard them and raised their heads. Their little faces were filled with astonishment under the orange sunset. Damn it! At this moment, a thunderous voice sounded above the children's heads. "Who dares to eat my meat? You'll be lucky if I don't eat you." Following this voice, boom! The seawater outside the reef suddenly formed a huge wave. A wave in the shape of a pig rushed towards the thin child with a roar. "Wah!" That frail child cried loudly. The lower half of his clothes had already been soaked by the seawater, and now, a pungent smell of urine wafted over. Monster. The thin girl in the distance was still the quick-witted one. Seeing this, she hurriedly jumped down from the reef and shouted as she jumped, "The monster is coming! The monster is here! The monster is here!" The children came to their senses. Their faces turned pale with fright as they moved their little legs. They either jumped off the reefs or jumped out of the sea, all of them running towards the fishing village. However, even though they were scared, their little hands were still tightly gripping the bamboo baskets and other things that they carried with them. "Mother! Mother! Wah wah!" The thin child who was so scared that he wet himself cried loudly and wanted to jump down from the reef. However, his legs had already turned to jelly and he couldn't move a single step no matter how hard he tried. Besides crying loudly, there was only despair in his eyes. Erdan. When the chubby child heard the thin child's cries, he subconsciously slowed down his steps. However, when he saw the huge tide behind the reef, the fear in his eyes grew stronger. He no longer dared to hesitate. He turned around and ran towards the fishing village while shouting, "The monsters are here! Erdan has been eaten by the monsters." The girl named Mao Chao was the first to land on the beach and run away. When she saw Erdan lying on the reef, she turned back without any hesitation and ran towards the reef. After running for a few steps, she threw down the bamboo basket in her hand. Where the bamboo basket fell, several big crabs fell out. They waved their pincers and fled into the seawater horizontally. How could Mao Chao be faster than the wave? Before she could get close to the reef, the pig-shaped wave had already reached the reef. Mao Chao shouted, "Erdan, jump down." Erdan cried and said the word "it" a few times. In the end, he couldn't say a complete sentence. Boom! The pig-shaped wave fell from the sky and smashed onto Erdan's head. Seeing that Erdan was about to be swept away, Mao Chao's eyes were also filled with despair. This was because the wave was so big that it seemed to cover the entire sky. If the wave fell, she would also be swept away, not to mention that there was a pig-shaped monster hiding in the wave. Just as Erdan and Mao Chao were in despair, the huge pig-shaped wave condensed in the air. The pig's tail swept towards Erdan's head and knocked him down onto the reef. Then, from the tail's root, a gush of seawater fell and drenched Erdan's entire body. Wah! Erdan, who was so scared that he didn't know how to cry, couldn't help but cry again. "Ha, eat me, eat me." The huge pig-shaped wave laughed loudly and actually twisted its fat waist on Erdan's head. Phew! Mao Chao suddenly woke up and let out a long sigh. Then her legs went soft and she collapsed on the beach. She ran away and ran back. She was already exhausted. Liao Chao struggled to get up from the ground, but no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to do so. Erdan was soaked by the seawater, and while he was crying, he choked on the water. While he was coughing, the pig-shaped wave rolled up in the air, and the pitiful Liao Chao and Erdan fell into the wave. The wave was like a giant hand, sweeping the two of them towards the distant ship. Mao Chao was scared again. Her two black eyes turned rapidly and Erdan was about to grin again. Amitabha, chastity. At this time, a gentle voice sounded again. You're being naughty again. Why don't you act like a monk? Look at how scared these children are. Master? Chastity's voice sounded as if he was wronged. Disciple wasn't being naughty. Disciple was just testing people's hearts. Didn't you see? Disciple only used a small spell and saw the selfishness of human nature. So many children, except for this little girl called Mao Chao, none of them stayed to save this child called Erden. They are so young and yet they don't have a caring heart. What will they do in the future? Chapter 45-61. Amitabha Buddha. The gentle voice continues, they are still children. It is already good enough that they can protect themselves in the face of danger. How can I ask them to save others? Moreover, their temperament needs to be cultivated bit by bit. It is impossible to know it from young. This is also the purpose of Master's Sutra Seeking Bliss. I want to use Buddhism to teach them from young. Besides, didn't this girl stay? As long as one person stays, the humanity of this world will not be annihilated. Mao Chao was originally afraid, but after hearing the voice, her heart calmed down. Although she did not understand the meaning of the words, she knew the Amitabha Buddha. Just as she was feeling relieved, her eyes lit up again. The sea waves disappeared and she was actually standing on a huge ship. Before she could see everything on the ship clearly, a strange face of a fire ape flashed in front of her. Mao Chao could not help but be afraid. She took 2 steps back and almost fell. At this moment, she felt something warm on her back. Mao Chao turned around to look. She screamed again. A pig ear that looked bigger than her was slightly swaying behind her back. Amitabha Buddha? The gentle voice sounded beside Mao Chao. Little benefactor, we are monks from Sutra Seeking Bliss. They are all this poor monk's disciples. Don't be afraid. Mao Chao looked towards the direction of the voice. A monk wearing a kasaya, wearing a pilu crown and holding a 9-ring monk staff was standing on the deck of the ship with a smile on his face. Wasn't this monk Chuanzong? Chuanzong did not neglect Mao Chao just because she was a little girl. He still held up one of his palms and saluted. Mao Chao's heart calmed down, but she was also a little panicked. She opened her mouth and stuttered, "Greetings, great master." Erdan, who is beside Mao Chao, cries again, "Mother, mother, Amitabha." Chuanzong smiled and said, "Young benefactor, don't worry. Your clothes are already wet. Let my disciple dry your clothes first. The sea breeze here is very strong. Maybe you will get sick, master." On the other side of the deck, a white dragon horse walked over, scaring Mao Chao, because the white dragon horse spoke human language. Moreover, it was the language of hidden immortal continent. You don't know this. These children grew up by the sea since they were young. They are not afraid of the sea breeze. Don't look at how cold the weather is now. Letting them swim 2 laps in the sea will not be a problem. Jinjia's lazy voice sounded again. Do you think they're dragons like you? He even swam 2 laps in the sea. Let's not talk about freezing to death. We'll tire them to death. The white dragon horse was naturally Zhen Feng. He smiled and replied, "Eldest senior brother, the circle I'm talking about is a casual circle. It's not like the big circle in the Eastern Sea." "Bah!" Zhenjie replied mercilessly, "You still have the nerve to talk about your East Sea. You, the 10th prince of the East Sea Dragon Palace, have no face at all. What happened to the dragon boat? What happened to the banquet? What happened to the song and dance of the conch maiden? Damn it, not a single promise was fulfilled. On the contrary, the wild flood dragons and sea beasts are endless. If it wasn't for me, Master would have been eaten by the sea beasts the moment he stepped into the Eastern Sea, right? You still have the nerve to call yourself the 10th prince of the Dragon Palace in front of me?" Eldest senior brother? Zhen Feng also felt wronged. Although his horse face was burning, he still said in a low voice, "Little brother also doesn't know what happened. There must be some big change in the East Sea Dragon Palace. Otherwise, when Master passes through the Eastern Sea, the Yu would have to express their gratitude." What's there to express? Those suppressed sea beasts coming over to make up the numbers? Then wouldn't they have to make me help out? Zhen Jie snorted coldly and said, Don't say so many useless things. Since your East Sea Dragon Palace doesn't have any offerings, when we get ashore, you still have to carry me. The previous agreement doesn't count anymore. Alright. Eldest senior brother. Zhen Feng was dejected. He swung his tail and walked to the side of the ship listlessly. Chun Jie opened his mouth as if he wanted to reprimand him. However, when he saw Zhen Jie's mountain-like body, he shook his head slightly and said to Zhen Kong, "Zhen Kong, help this child dry his clothes." "Yes, master." Zhen Kong replied. Just as he took a few steps, Erden was so scared that he wanted to grin again. Zhen Jie called out, "Zhen Han, what are you waiting for? Do you want master to call you? Don't you know that your Confucian cultivation true qi is the best at drying clothes?" "Yes, yes, eldest senior brother. Little brother understands." On the other side of the deck, a Confucian general dressed in armor instantly got out of his lazy state and flew over energetically. As he rubbed his hands, faint flames appeared. They finally saw a human again. Although this human had thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a murderous aura, Zhuo Chao and Erden finally calmed down. With Zhen Jie around, Zhen Han naturally wouldn't burn Erden's clothes. He just pretended to be careless. Therefore, it didn't take long for him to dry Erden's clothes. At this moment, the ship also shook and stopped. From the cabin of the ship, 2 7th-grade Essence Force Sea Demons popped their heads out. When the 2 sea demons appeared, Zhuo Chao and Erden trembled again. They were so scared that they even closed their eyes. The 2 sea demons tiptoed to a place not far from Chunzong. They lowered their voices and said respectfully, "Master, we have already arrived at the hidden Immortal continent. Our ship is too big and can't get close to the shore." The sea demons spoke in the human language. They were very stuttering and even a little unclear. Chunzong was a little stunned as if he didn't understand. Zhen Jie snorted and said, "If you know that you can't get close to the shore, then what are you still talking about? Why don't you hurry up and get a small boat over? Don't you know that my master can't fly?" "Yes, yes." When the 2 sea demons heard Zhen Jie's words, their bodies clearly trembled. Without saying anything else, they hugged their heads and ran back. Then, they heard a crackling sound from the cabin. Not long later, a rather big ship appeared on the surface of the sea. "Damn it!" Zhen Jie cursed. "Can such a big ship get close to the shore?" "Yes, yes." A sea demon hurriedly said, "Senior, don't worry. There are no submerged reefs at the bottom of the sea. This ship can definitely get close to the shore." "Good." Zhen Jie nodded and said, "If my master's kasaya is stained with a drop of seawater, I will teach you a lesson." That sea demon replied with a sad face, "Senior, how about this junior carry master to the shore?" "Nonsense. If he can carry you and fly, why do we need you?" Zhen Feng jumped up and said, "I am the 10th prince of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. I have already carried my master across the Eastern Sea. Do you know? Amitabha." Chunzong chanted, "Thank you, benefactors. This poor monk will take his leave now. I hope we will meet again in the future." You're welcome." The 2 sea demons hurriedly returned the salute with a relieved expression. Zhen Jie finally stood up from the deck, causing the entire ship to shake. However, this was nothing. His words stunned the 2 sea demons on the spot. "Go back and recite the rebirth mantra for me 3 million times. 3 million times. The sea demons' faces were even more bitter than if they had eaten a pill. Zhen Jie glanced at the 2 sea demons and said coldly, "What's wrong? Don't you miss the rebirth mantra? How many living beings have you killed? Can you transcend all of them by reciting it 3 million times? If you don't miss it, I will recite the rebirth mantra twice now." Yes, senior. We will definitely recite it, definitely." The 2 sea demons turned pale with fright and immediately replied, "Recite it now." Zhen Jie stood up from the ship and watched as Zhen Kong carefully helped Chuanzong onto the small boat, berating him sternly. "Namo Amitabha yi toda gato yi toda yi Amitabha padi 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 Amitabha." Ah? Why is the rebirth mantra so short? A moment later, Zhenjie stopped in the air and glared at the two sea demons. You dare to fool me? Senior. The two sea demons' faces changed drastically, and they hurriedly said, We don't dare. Eldest senior brother? Zhenhan, who was dancing the sutra with her staff, hurriedly whispered, The mantra of rebirth is so short. Zhenjie was stunned and looked a little embarrassed. Then he snorted and said, Forget it, you're lucky. If I had known earlier, I would have let you all chant. At this point, Zhenjie tactfully shut up and walked towards the hidden immortal continent with large strides. Although Zhenjie was sincerely worshipping Buddha and was also very respectful towards Chuanzang, he was also extremely lazy. Not to mention chanting the Buddhist sutra, he couldn't even remember the name of the Buddhist sutra. The two sea demons didn't dare to say anything. Seeing Zhenjie leave, the two sea demons hurriedly flew back to the ship and carefully stood on the deck. After Chuanzang sat on the small boat and reached the beach, the two sea demons jumped into the sea and escaped towards the depths of the East Sea. Chuanzang got down from the small boat and Zhen Kong carefully supported him. Chuanzang walked past the beach and turned his head to look at the vast sea and the footprints he left on the beach. He couldn't help but sigh, Amitabha, this poor monk has finally stepped onto the land of the hidden immortal continent again. My Buddha is merciful. This time, it is completely different. Last time, this poor monk only had the heart of Buddha. The heart is willing but the strength is insufficient. Now, this poor monk has 3 scrolls of Mahayana Buddhist Sutra. The Buddha's mantra is not only to enlighten the common people, it is also to let the hidden immortal continent bathe in the glory of Buddha. Although this journey was difficult, this poor monk has finally walked more than half of it. The so-called merit and virtue is nothing. The only real thing is these footprints. These footprints can once again step into the longevity town. I hope they can also step into the hearts of the people. Chapter 45-62. When Chuanzang turned around, he saw a row of shallow footprints beside the footprints he left on the beach. It was Zhen Kong. Of Chuanzang's 4 disciples, Zhenjie, Zhenfeng, and Zhenhan were all riding the wind. Only Zhen Kong was supporting Chuanzang as they walked along the beach. Dang dang dang. At this moment, the sound of a gong came from the fishing village in the distance. Clamorous shouts could be heard, Help, the sea monsters are eating people. Amidst the noise, a group of strong fishermen rushed out of the fishing village with harpoons, spears, scimitars, and other weapons in their hands. They rushed toward the beach while shouting, Amitabha. Chuanzang retracted his gaze from the sea and looked at Zhenjie, who was standing in the air. Zhenjie, this is all your fault. Why aren't you apologizing to the fishermen? Yes, master. Zhenjie nodded. He raised his hand and punched Zhenfeng, who was carrying Ji Chao and Air Dan on his butt. He scolded, Go, apologize to the fishermen. Why is it me again? What does this have to do with me? Zhenfeng felt wronged and shouted. Just as he was about to give up, a gust of wind suddenly blew from the East Sea. The sky that was covered in the sunset glow now had layers of black and white ribbons. These colors seemed to be caused by the gust of wind, but also seemed to be caused by the folding of the void. At the same time, where the sea met the sky, a layer of pitch-black demonic clouds quickly spread along the surface of the sea. Within the demonic clouds, the silhouette of a huge shell could be seen. In front of the demonic clouds, there was a faint golden shadow. This shadow was like a huge eagle. With a flap of its wings, it flew hundreds of miles. This shadow carried a terrifying aura as it crossed the surface of the sea. Wherever the shadow passed, it created waves that were dozens of feet tall. It looked like it was faster than lightning as it pounced toward Chuanzang. Protect Master? Zhen Kong was originally supporting Chuanzang. At this moment, he roared and reached out his hand to grab the magic wand. Then he rushed into the sky. He faced the terrifying aura head-on. Okay. Zhenhan didn't dare to delay. She replied and threw the scripture on the ground. She waved her staff and flew to Chuanzang's side. She looked like a loyal and righteous person. Damn it. Zhenfeng cursed when he saw Zhenghan snatching the opportunity to perform before him. He hurriedly landed on the ground and tossed 2 balls and 2 grass to the ground. He didn't care whether the 2 children were injured or not as he hurriedly shouted, Master, don't be afraid. Your disciple is here. But Longma Zhenfeng rushed over like the wind, also blocking Chunjiu behind him. Fortunately, Liao Chao and Erdan were originally children who grew up on the beach. Although Long Ma Zhenfeng threw it savagely, there weren't any sharp rocks on the beach. The two children rolled on the beach and immediately got up. Looking at the violent winds and huge waves in the distance, as well as the dark clouds in the sky, they didn't hesitate to rush towards the small fishing village. Outside the small fishing village, the fishermen who had already come out with all kinds of weapons saw the white waves on the sea and the dark clouds in the sky. Although the terrifying aura wasn't directed at them, it was enough to make them tremble with fear. Now that they saw Ji Chao and Erdan rushing back, who would dare to be arrogant outside? After receiving Ji Chao and Erdan, they all turned around and ran back to the fishing village. They tightly closed their doors and didn't even have the courage to peek outside. Zhen Jie saw the faces of Zhenfeng and the others. Zhen Jie revealed a cold smile. However, when the terrifying aura approached, Zhen Jie's expression turned cold. He shouted inwardly, "Not good." Zhen Jie hurriedly took out the nine-tooth rake and his body glowed brightly. His body expanded and he shouted, "Damn fire ape, this is a demonic beast with an 8th grade essence force. How can you be a match for him? Quickly come back." Zhen Jie's attitude toward Zhenkong was different. He knew very well that Zhenkong had disregarded his opponent's strength and charged forward without any regard for his own safety. This was Zhenkong's true intention and not some pretense. Thus, his words were filled with great concern. Unfortunately, Zhen Jie's reminder was too late. Before he finished speaking, a golden-winged rock appeared. Wasn't it Peng Jun? A golden light flashed in Peng Jun's eyes. He glanced at Zhenkong and stretched out a sharp claw. Ka! It swept through the sky and tore the void apart. The sharp claw instantly grabbed Zhenkong's head. Under the sharp claws, the space within several kilometers was sealed. Let alone Zhenkong, who was flying, even the surface of the sea beneath him froze in an instant. Zhenkong faced Peng Jun, who was many times stronger than him. His eyes turned red as he roared towards the sky. The blood vessels on his arms flared as he tried to wave his magic wand. Unfortunately, under Peng Jun's sharp claw, Zhenkong was like a child. Peng! The sharp claw grabbed Zhenkong's magic wand. At the same time, the magic wand was sent flying. Zhenkong's body also fell into the sea like a rock. Damn it! Zhenfeng saw this from afar and his body trembled. Even his horse's legs went soft. He shouted in shock, "How can there be a demonic beast with 8th grade origin energy? Is Mahavairakana crazy? I have to hurry and inform the Immortal Palace." Zhenhan's heart was also pounding. He moved to block Chunzang's body and said, "Oh, no, I have to hurry to the Immortal Palace to get reinforcements." Chunzang, on the other hand, didn't panic at all. He chanted Buddha's name and calmly looked at the sea and sky. Roar! Seeing Zhenkong being knocked into the sea, Zhen Jie was furious. With a roar, it rushed into the sky and turned into a huge light shadow. This light shadow suddenly elongated and distorted. In an instant, it landed in front of Peng Jun. Without waiting for the light shadow to solidify, the wind whistled again. The nine-toothed rake was surrounded by clouds and it pounced towards Peng Jun like a nine-headed dragon. Rumble. Just as the nine-toothed rake descended, the black and white stripes in the sky suddenly condensed. Amidst the rumbling of thunder, Demon King Ni Quan's figure appeared. When Ni Quan saw such a wild chastity ring, a strange expression appeared in his eyes. As he waved his tail, layers of spatial ripples appeared in an attempt to block the nine-toothed rake. Bang 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 bang. A series of explosions sounded. Wherever the nine-toothed rake passed, it was invincible. All the spatial ripples were destroyed. Just when Ni Quan was about to wave his tail again, Zhen Jie raised its hoof. Pung. It was as if the world was being trampled by this hoof. The light shadows in the surrounding 10 li fell into this hoof. Zhen Jie's hoof suddenly disappeared into the void. Soon after, Peng Jun's eagle cry resounded amidst the rumbling sounds. Finally, with a loud boom, Peng Jun's body flipped a few times in the air. He hurriedly flapped his wings and stabilized his body. How can this pig be so powerful? Peng Jun couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, no wonder Taoist Xiao told us to be careful. Ouch, not good. Peng Jun was surprised. Waves appeared in the void again. The nine-toothed rake shot out from the void like a meteor and ruthlessly smashed towards Peng Jun's back. Peng Jun didn't doubt that if this nine-toothed rake fell, 9 bloody holes would appear on his body. He would also lose half his life. Fortunately, Peng Jun didn't need to raise his head and spit out lightning. At this moment, Bai Qing had already arrived. The pitch-black demonic clouds scattered across the sky. The huge shell blocked the nine-tooth rake. With a loud bang, the multicolored light shone for thousands of feet. Bai Qing's shell trembled rapidly. The huge body also staggered as if it couldn't stand steadily. The multicolored halo on Bai Qing's shell was extremely powerful. Even if Chastity Ring's nine-toothed rake hit it, the halo alone could greatly reduce the force. However, at this time, the multicolored halo had been taken back by God's punishment. Bai Qing could not adapt to it for a while. She used her shell to take on Chastity Ring's attack. Previously, when Zhenjie was fighting with a great demon of the lower 8th grade in the Great Snow Mountain, he had just arrived at the Elysium from the primitive continent. Due to the laws of heaven and earth, many of his supernatural powers were restricted by the laws. He could only reach the upper 8th grade of the Elysium. Moreover, at that time, Zhenjie wasn't familiar with the environment of the 3 continents and couldn't fully display his strength. In addition, the 5-colored halo of the great demon was magical. It seemed that he could only fight the great demon to a draw. But now, not only was Zhenjie used to the power of the stars and moon in the 3 continents, he also used some secret techniques to avoid the power of the laws and recovered some of his supernatural powers. His strength had already surpassed the peak of the 8th grade of the Elysium and was not far from the edge of the 9th grade of the Elysium again. How could Bai Qing, who had lost her 5-colored halo, resist the nine-toothed rake so easily? Under this attack, although the shell wasn't penetrated, Bai Qing was also injured. As the huge shell swayed, a shadow immediately appeared and hurriedly escaped from the battle. Where do you think you're going? Zhenjie took advantage of the situation and roared. Once again he stretched out his trotter and stomped towards Bai Qing. Boom boom boom. At this moment, An Quan made his move. Ripples appeared on his horn and a series of spatial collapses closed in on Zhenjie. Zhenjie was slightly shocked. He opened his mouth and spat out a pillar of light. It was like a fountain that hit the spatial collapses and instantly pierced through them. Damn it. Seeing Bai Qing take advantage of the situation to escape, An Quan flapped his wings and pounced over. On the other side, Peng Jun also flapped his wings and attacked with his sharp claws. Zhenjie cursed under his breath, where did these 3 great demons come from? Their strength is at the 8th grade of the Elysium. I have enough confidence to fight against 2 of them, but it will be difficult to deal with 3 of them. You demons! Zhenjie waved his nine-toothed rake in the air and shouted, where are you demons from? I'm a monk from the Sutra of Nirvana. What grudges do I have with you? Why are you chasing after me? I'm in a good mood today. If it's a misunderstanding, get the hell out of here and I'll let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, don't blame me for killing all of you with my rake. Chapter 45-63. Humph. Bai Qing broke away from the battle. His 2 shells glowed faintly, and Bai Qing's clear face appeared on the surface of the shell. His face was filled with resentment. How dare you call yourself a monk from the sutra seeking nirvana? How can there be a monk who calls himself an old man in this world? That's my freedom. It has nothing to do with you. Zhenjie shouted impatiently, if you have a grudge, say it quickly. If you're mistaken, get out of here and let me have a good night's sleep. Ah. Peng Jun sneered, monk, if we don't have a grudge, why did we come all the way here from the sacred realm of 1,000 demons? If we don't kill you today to avenge my poor brother Bai, we won't have the face to call ourselves demon kings. Brother Bai? Although Peng Jun didn't mention the name of the 5-colored shell demon, nor did he say that he wanted to avenge it, Zhenjie understood that not many demons had died in his hands. The 5-colored shell demon was one of them, and the strongest one at that. Seeing that the three demon kings wanted to avenge it, the grudge was naturally formed with the five-colored shell demon. However, Zhenjie still pretended not to know. He sneered, "Three old demons on this sutra seeking nirvana? There are thousands of demons that died in my hands. Who knows which one you're talking about? Besides, those demons were tricked into coming here to seek death. If you want revenge, you can find the one who tricked them. Why are you looking for me?" "Humph, I only know that my brother died in your hands." Bai Qing snorted. "I don't know anything else." "Your royal younger brother?" Zhenjie looked at Bai Qing strangely and asked, "You look so poor that you don't even have a piece of colored clothing. How can you be the brother of that upstart shining with 5 colors? Obviously, you were tricked into coming here." Bai Qing's heart ached at the mention of 5 colors. He sneered, "You don't have to worry about that. Just give me your life." Just as he said this, Peng Jun screamed from afar, "Damn it!" On Peng Jun's back, a huge pig's hoof had appeared out of nowhere. This pig's hoof had crushed the space within a radius of dozens of miles, trapping Peng Jun within it. Seeing that she had been fooled, Bai Qing was furious. The colorless halo around her flashed again, and she smashed toward the chastity ring. Bai Qing's 5-colored sea god shell's bloodline had been taken away, but the shell had been refined for many years. The material of the shell itself was also rare. When Bai Qing pounced on the chastity ring, a booming sound came from the sky as if a giant mountain had collapsed. Bai Qing doesn't seem to have many tricks up her sleeve. Since Bai Qing is already like this, Bai Xing can't be that strong. Although Enai Quan was in the middle of the battle, his heart was elsewhere. He had many thoughts just like Enai Xing from the Great Sage Hall. Along the way, he had been thinking about how to see Bai Qing's bottom line. Now that he saw that Bai Qing's 5 colors divine ability could no longer be used, he felt much more at ease. With such thoughts in mind, Enai Quan hurriedly said, "Brother Bai, don't be anxious. I'm here to help you." As he said that, Enai Quan swung his big tail. Together with Bai Qing, they formed a triangle and attacked Zhenjie's fat head from both sides. Seeing the two forces sealing the space around it, layers of void cracks appeared in the nearby space, entangling and swallowing each other. Zhenjie knew that although its kick could injure Peng Jun, it would definitely be killed. Zhenjie sighed secretly. It stretched out its hooves from the void and faced Enai Quan. The 9-toothed rake danced and struck toward Bai Qing. Peng Jun escaped from the desperate situation. Without hesitation, he let out a long cry and pounced toward Zhenjie again. Seeing that the 3 demon kings wanted to take revenge for the 5-colored sea god shell clan, Zhenjie had no choice but to pull itself together and use all its tricks to fight against them. The wind blew and the clouds shook on the shore of the East Sea, and the waves surged to the sky. The 4 demon clans fought from the sky to the sea, and from the sea to the sky. Even though the moon was bright and the stars were sparse, their battle cries still shook the sky. Zhen Kong had already flown out from the sea and stood guard in front of Chun Zong with a magic wand in his hand. As for Dragon Horse Zhen Feng and Zhen Han, seeing how powerful the 3 demon kings were, they were already afraid. They looked at Zhenjie's divine ability anxiously. As long as Zhenjie showed less signs of being defeated, they would immediately go to the Immortal Palace and the East Sea Dragon Palace to call for reinforcements. When Peng Jun, Enai Quan, and Bai Qing came to the hidden Immortal Continent to take revenge, they had already investigated Chun Zong and his 4 disciples. They also knew that Zhen Kong was a fire ape that Xiaohua didn't allow to be hurt. Therefore, even though Peng Jun's claw looked very powerful, it didn't hurt Zhen Kong at all. Zhen Kong flew out from the sea in confusion and hurriedly protected Chun Zong. His eyes were filled with envy as he looked at Zhenjie's battle with the 3 demon kings. Boom! Just as everyone had their own thoughts and were dazzled by the battle, a loud sound was heard. Then, kacha-kacha, sounds of shattering echoed, followed by a miserable shriek. Bai Qing was the first to escape from the battle. On the incomparably hard shell, a huge pig's hoof print could be faintly seen. Around the hoof print, there were 3 large holes and many cracks. 2 of the 3 large holes were flowing with blood. After Bai Qing escaped from the battle, his figure immediately swayed and he flew towards the distance. Seeing that Bai Qing was injured, Peng Jun spread his wings. The sound of wind and thunder resounded. Similarly, dozens of afterimages appeared and flew towards the depths of the East Sea. Although Peng Jun was fast, Ni Quan, who had some understanding of Bai Qing's strength, was even faster. Bai Qing had just been injured by the nine-toothed rake. Before he could escape from the battle, an obscure fluctuation appeared on his horn. As his wings flapped, his figure had already entered the void and disappeared. Zhen Kong. Seeing that the three demon kings had retreated, Zhen Jie shouted, "Protect Master well. This daddy will go and take the heads of these demon kings." After saying that, Zhen Jie moved his figure and turned into a stream of light to chase after them. However, he disappeared along with the three demon kings in an instant. Eldest senior brother is truly formidable. Dragon Horse Zhen Feng flattered, "You actually managed to defeat the three archfiend kings. Seeing that your strength has already reached the highest realm in the three continents, you are truly a role model for us disciples." Eldest senior brother's strength has already reached the top. Zhen Han praised. His dedication is worthy of us learning. He was already exhausted from fighting the three demon kings, but in order to eliminate any future troubles, he still mustered his courage and chased after them. However, with this spirit of not giving up until the goal is achieved, eldest senior brother is also a role model for us. Humph, two bootlickers. Zhen Kong snorted coldly. There is no need to talk about senior brother Zhen Jie's strength, but if we are talking about spirit, I feel that the possibility of him being lazy and sleeping is higher. Master, you have to be a witness. Dragon Horse Zhen Feng immediately complained. When eldest senior brother returns, I will tell him this. You are not allowed to say that I am complaining behind his back. This is what Zhen Kong said himself. Amit Ba. Chun Zong chanted. Master was frightened and my body is also tired. Let us find a place to rest first. Yes, Master. Hearing that, Zhen Kong hurriedly agreed. Disciple will bring Master to the small fishing village and find a place to stay. No need. Chun Zong waved his hand. At dusk, you scared the children of others. How can we find a place to stay? It is better to find a place to stay outside. Yes, Master. Zhen Kong felt that it was reasonable. He raised his head and with a flash of golden light in his eyes, he could already see clearly. He used his finger to point at a place that was like a hill not far from the fishing village. There is a place to shelter from the wind. Master, you can rest there tonight. Amit Ba, let's go there. Chun Zong nodded and walked towards the direction that Zhen Kong pointed. Zhen Kong flew over first and waved his magic wand to clean up the surroundings. After Chun Zong sat down cross-legged and began to chant Buddhist scriptures, he stood far away with his magic wand in his hand and was on guard. Not only did he release his essence to scout the surroundings, he even executed the eye-clearing technique. His eyes flickered with golden light, appearing exceptionally bright in the darkness. Too pretentious. Zhen Han and Dragon Horse Zhen Feng exchanged a glance and mocked. The three archfiend kings have already been beaten away by eldest senior brother. Which other archfiend would be so blind as to come and seek death? The man and the horse laughed and also found a place to meditate. The curtain of night gradually lifted and the first rays of dawn slowly arrived. At the seaside where the battle took place last night, the sky was clear and boundless. The sun that had just begun to rise sprinkled its not-so-glaring brilliance onto the calm surface of the sea and also onto the fishing village. Caw-caw-caw. A rooster's crow sounded. Chun Zong, who had been meditating, moved his eyes slightly and was about to wake up. Seeing this, Zhen Kong's figure swayed and the dew on his shoulder dripped down. He was about to fly to Chun Zhang's side. However, at this moment, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at the fishing village. In the direction of the fishing village, a beautiful woman wearing ordinary clothes and carrying a bamboo basket leisurely walked over. The woman's eyes were searching as she walked. When she saw Chun Zhang's location clearly, joy appeared on her face and she quickened her steps. Hey! Zhen Kong roared and blocked the path with his magic wand. He raised his hand and pointed at the woman, saying, "Bold archfiend, why are you still not revealing your true form?" The woman was stunned. With a hoarse voice, she hurriedly called out, "Master, please spare my life. This concubine is the mother of the girl you met yesterday." Mo Chao has already told this concubine about yesterday's situation. This concubine knows that this concubine has misunderstood all of you masters. Thus, this concubine was afraid that this concubine would be hungry, so this concubine made some biscuits early in the morning to appease your hunger. Bullshit. Zhen Kong raised his magic wand and a cold wind swept up. He aimed it at the woman's forehead and shouted, "If you are Mo Chao's mother, how did you know that my master is immortal and needs to eat?" Chapter 45-64. Master. That woman says pitifully, "This concubine really does not know if you masters need to eat. However, this concubine thinks that since you are a human, you should eat. Last night on the sea was truly dangerous." Tuakeo's father did not allow this concubine to come out. This concubine thought about it, and felt that if this concubine did not express her apology, tisk. Zhen Kong is truly furious. That magic wand of his falls a few more times, but in the end, it does not fall. He holds back his killing intent and shouts, "This daddy has already seen your true form. Stop pretending. If not for the fact that you know that my master is easily swayed, how would you dare to come over? If you still do not leave." Disciple. Chuanzong has already woken up. Looking over, he says unhappily, "What is going on? Does this female benefactor have something to say?" "Damn Zhenhan." Zhen Kong says angrily, "Why are you still not hurrying to protect master?" Achoo. Zhenhan sneezes on a pile of firewood that looks like a dried tree trunk. She flips over and says, "Second senior brother, aren't you being too careful? Now that you have the reputation of eldest senior brother, which little demon would come looking for trouble?" After getting up, Chuanzong tidies up his kasaya. Beside him, Longma Zhenfeng has already come over and says with a smile, "Master, this is Tuakeo's mother. She said that she is here to deliver the pancakes to master to express her misunderstanding of us yesterday. Amitba." Chuanzong reveals a smile. Putting his palms together, he walks over to where Zhen Kong is blocking that woman and says, "Female benefactor is too polite. We are all monks and do not eat meat. Please take this pancake back. As long as female benefactor is willing, this poor monk is already very grateful." "Don't worry, master." That woman says with a smile, "Tuakeo has already said that master looks like a monk. This concubine did not use any meat oil when making the pancakes." "Master." Zhen Kong is anxious. His figure flashes back slightly as he calls out, "Don't come over. This is a demon." "Why is it a demon again?" Chuanzong is startled. He unconsciously stands there and looks for a moment in disbelief. The woman obediently placed the basket on the ground and said, "Master, if you have any doubts, I won't go over. After you've eaten the pancakes, you can leave the basket here. I'll ask Xiao Chao to come and get it, Zhen Kong." Chuanzong grumbled, "This woman is clearly the mother of the grass. How could she be?" Zhen Kong snorted coldly. He turned to the side and said, "Master, you're the one courting death. It has nothing to do with me." Zhenfeng, "Just wait for Zhenjie to come back and roast you." Seeing that Zhen Kong had moved aside, the woman was overjoyed. However, just as she was about to take a step forward, Zhen Kong's demonic wand struck down from the sky. This strike was truly strange, and it was extremely powerful. The woman wanted to dodge, but she was completely enveloped by the wind generated by the demonic wand. There was no way for her to dodge. Pa! With a muffled sound, the woman's head and upper body were shattered. She died on the spot without even a scream. Chuanzong was startled. He looked at Zhen Kong in disbelief. Then, he looked at the woman who was smashed into meat paste. In an instant, an indescribable anger arose in his heart. Previously, Zhen Kong had killed many demons, including some Taoist cultivators. However, those demons and cultivators didn't die such a miserable death. Moreover, when he looked at the basket beside the woman's corpse, Chuanzong couldn't help but think of the fisherwoman he met when he first came to the hidden Immortal continent from the Western Paradise, as well as the dry rations her family gave him. That fisherwoman wasn't here. After more than 200 years, she should have died long ago. However, how similar were the two fisherwomen? They were both kind to others, especially Xiao Chao's mother. Not only did she not blame Zhenjie for his evil deeds yesterday, she even brought pancakes. Not only did Zhen Kong not understand her intentions, he even killed her with a single strike. If she was a demon, why didn't she fight Zhen Kong? Why was she beaten to death for no reason? Seeing the change in Chuanzong's expression, Zhen Kong understood Chuanzong's anger. He raised his magic wand and swept it across the woman's corpse a few times. He pulled out a scarlet insect that was more than a foot long and as thick as a thumb. At this moment, the insect's surface was cracked and its insides had been smashed into paste by the magic wand. Zhen Kong said coldly, "Master, this is called a control insect. It usually burrows into the 7 orifices of humans or demons and is controlled by it. The larva of this insect has the strength of a 1st-grade elemental power. The adult should have the strength of a 3rd or 4th-grade elemental power. It flies like lightning. If this disciple let it fly another half a foot, Master would have already died." After saying that, Zhen Kong placed the magic wand on his shoulder. He ignored Chuanzong and landed on a distant hill. He looked up at the rising sun in the east with a yearning expression. Chuanzong looked at Zhen Kong's departing figure and then looked at the woman's corpse on the ground. He was so angry that he couldn't speak. After a moment, Chuanzong calmed down and chanted the rebirth mantra. He began to clean up the flesh on the ground. Zhen Kong looked at him coldly. Just as he was about to raise his hand and release a fire art, Zhen Han jumped out from the pile of firewood and flew to Chuanzong's side. She said respectfully, "Master, disciple is here to help you." Bootlika. Zhen Kong sneered and looked to the east. It seemed to be where the Fortune Dao Palace was located. Zhen Kong was a fire ape. Before he was suppressed on the Dawn Rain continent, he killed countless humans and demons. Even after he escaped, he killed many humans and demons. In his eyes, there wasn't much difference between humans and demons. There was no difference between him killing a human and a demon. However, he didn't know how big of an impact it was for Chuanzong to kill a human in front of him. Moreover, Zhen Kong protected Chuanzong with all his might. He was afraid that Chuanzong would suffer a single injury. However, he didn't have any special respect for Chuanzong. He also didn't really treat Chuanzong as his master. He was only fulfilling the trust his true master had given him. While Chuanzong was an esteemed monk, he was also a human. Seeing that Zhen Kong had killed someone, he immediately stood to the side and pretended to be cultured. Even though he knew that what Zhen Kong said and did was not wrong, the anger in his heart would not dissipate so easily. Unfortunately, the matter was far from over. Before Chuanzong and Zhen Han could clean up the woman's corpse, 2 more people hurriedly appeared in the small fishing village. The person in front was a fisherman with messy hair and some white hair on his temples. The fisherman was pulling a short girl. Wasn't that Tua Chao? Tua Chao struggled with all her strength and didn't want to come over. However, the fisherman's face was ashen and he looked very angry. He pulled Tua Chao and walked over. "Ha!" Dragon Horse Jin Feng laughed and said, "My beloved second senior brother, look, you've caused a disaster. You killed his mother and wife, and now he's dragging his family to look for you. Let's see what you're going to give him as a wife. How about this? You stay in this small fishing village and sell yourself to Tua Chao's father as a worker. When you've earned enough copper coins to give Tua Chao another mother, you can chase after him and continue to pray for scriptures in paradise." TSK. Zhen Kong was enraged. He revealed the ferocity of a fire ape at Dragon Horse Jin Feng as he shouted, "Damn it, if you dare to say another word, do you believe that I won't beat you to death with my staff?" "Eldest senior brother?" Dragon Horse Jin Feng habitually shouted. However, just as he shouted, he realized that Zhenjie had gone to hide. He hurriedly shut his mouth and hid his horse face under his buttocks. Quick! Zhen Han naturally also saw Tua Chao. He hurriedly raised his hand and flames appeared between his fingers. He said, "Master, please let this disciple clean up this mess." "No need." Chuanzong shook his head. This matter must be explained to Tua Chao and her father. After all, This woman is their relative. They should know. Whether they believe it or not, that's their problem. They are mortals. Zhenhan said helplessly, how can they believe it? Amitabha, your master is also a mortal. Chuanzong chanted Buddha's name. Whether they want to beat or scold, it's up to them. Master. The fisherman approached and saluted from afar. My wife just disappeared. I heard from my daughter that she was baking pancakes early in the morning. I didn't see her. Zhenhan waved his hand impatiently. What does your wife baking pancakes have to do with us? Isn't this my family's bamboo basket? The man originally wanted to explain with a smile. However, he inadvertently glanced around and immediately saw the bamboo basket by the side of the road. When he looked to the side, he saw clothes that were not completely buried. Mother? Tuo Chao struggled to hide behind her father. However, when she saw the familiar clothes by the side of the road, how could she endure it? She immediately pulled her hand out of her father's hand and rushed to the side of the road. As she ran, tears from the corner of her eyes flowed down her cheeks and fell into the air. Sigh, Amitabha. Chuanzong sighed and walked a few steps forward. He clasped his hands together and said, Young benefactor, master, be careful. Zhenhan, who was at the side, was also moved. She hurriedly stood in front of Chuanzong and reminded him. Mother. Tuo Chao ran too hastily and fell to the ground. Although there was a lot of sand around the fishing village, Tuo Chao's knees and elbows were still scratched and blood flowed out. Get out of the way. Chuanzong was anxious. He pushed Zhenhan and went around to help Tuo Chao up. Zhenhan hesitated and turned to look at Zhenkong. Zhenkong was not paying attention to them at all. He was only squinting his eyes and looking at the sun. Zhenhan understood that although Zhenkong was angry, she would definitely not stay out of the matter and let Chuanzong die. Zhenkong must have seen that Tuo Chao and her father were not controlled by the control bug. Therefore, Zhenhan only took a few steps forward and was on guard. She did not stop Chuanzong. Chapter 45-65. To Chuanzong's surprise, even though Imo Chao's body was scratched, she was very agile. She rolled on the ground and immediately got up. Ignoring Chuanzong, she pounced towards the blood-stained clothes on the ground. My wife. The man also realized what happened. His face was filled with sorrow as he quickened his steps and followed behind Imo Chao. Chuanzong was very embarrassed. He took a deep breath and walked over. Benefactor, please listen to this poor monk's explanation. The man suddenly sped up and shouted, You killed my wife. You have to pay for my wife's death with your life? Oh no! Seeing the man's strange behavior, Zhenhan was shocked. He quickly opened his mouth and was about to spit out a mouthful of sword qi. However, at this moment, Chunzong was standing in front of him. Moreover, the fisherman had already spat out black gas from his nostrils. A black light like a control insect appeared in the black gas. Zhenhan's figure flashed. Just as she dodged Chunzang's attack, the sword qi in his mouth had already been spat out. At this moment, there was another thunderous sound. Kill! A rolling shadow of a staff swept past Chunzang's head. The powerful wave of qi not only pushed Chunzong to the ground, but even Zhenhan's figure staggered a few times and almost fell down. Under such a powerful staff shadow, the control insect was already smashed into several pieces. As for the fisherman behind the control insect, he was not spared either. Where the staff shadow disappeared, his upper body was also smashed into meat paste. Father. Imo Chao had just pounced in front of her mother's corpse. Before she could smell the familiar scent on her mother's clothes, she heard another sound behind her. She naturally turned around and saw her father being smashed into pieces by a magic staff. Although Little Grass was a strong girl, she was still young. She only cried out once before she fainted. Zhenkong. Chuanzong stood up from the ground. His pilu hat was already crooked. He did not care about his clothes and shouted, What are you doing? Why did you kill someone again? Zhenkong's figure appeared in midair. He looked at Chuanzong and his eyes flashed with golden light. He looked at the fainted Imo Chao and seemed to be thinking about something. Don't you dare! Chuanzong hurriedly stood in front of Imo Chao and said, "If you kill someone again, kill me first. She doesn't have a control insect on her. Why would I kill her?" Zhen Kong sneered and pointed at the control insect corpse on the ground with his magic staff. "Take a look for yourself. Think about it. Didn't the black gas fly out of this person's nose?" With that, Zhen Kong did not say anything else and he flew towards the fishing village. Although Zhen Kong didn't say what they were going to do, Zhen Han understood that there was definitely something wrong with this fishing village, since control bugs kept appearing. So, Zhen Han shouted, "Zhen, be on your guard. Don't let the monster." Without Zhen Jie and Zhen Kong, Zhen Feng was very diligent. With a cry, he hurriedly poked his head out from under his butt and looked around. He even cried out, "Damn it, where did all the merit points from the Immortal Palace go? I must report them to Immortal Emperor Goqin for being absent from work." Amitabha. Chuanzong's mouth was filled with bitterness. He squatted down and picked up Imo Chao's thin and weak body. He was really worried about how to explain himself after Imo Chao woke up. "Master," Zhen Han said softly, "these two control insects are really repulsive. The Pegasus only controlled the two adults and did not control the little girl. Second senior brother killed these two adults, and both of them were seen by this little girl. Have no way to explain ourselves. Why don't we kill the little girl as well? Forget it." Amitabha. Disgust appeared in Chuanzong's eyes. He glanced at Zhen Han and said, "Zhen Han, you are now Ai's disciple and not a Confucian general. Don't break the precepts." Zhen Han coldly snorted and didn't say anything else. She raised her hand and a cluster of flames appeared, burning the corpses of the fisherman and the woman on the ground, as well as the pancakes in the bamboo basket. Chuanzong opened his mouth and wanted to stop her. However, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. In less than 5 minutes, Zhen Kong flew out of the fishing village. Chuanzong hurriedly asked, "Amitabha, Zhen Kong, don't commit any more crimes. Why would I be so fierce for no reason?" Zhen Kong waved his hand impatiently and said, "If there weren't any monsters, I wouldn't have bothered to make a move." With that, Zhen Kong gloomily muttered to himself, "This is strange. If there aren't any monsters in the fishing village, why would two control insects appear out of nowhere?" Zhen Han glanced at Zhen Kong and said indifferently, "You killed people and didn't clean them up. Instead, you asked me to clean them up for you. Now that I've cleaned them up, you can explain to Imo Chao yourself." With that, Zhen Han looked at the fishing village in the distance. At this moment, some fishermen had already poked their heads out, but none of them had the courage to come out. What's there to explain?" Zhen Kong sneered. "I only care about protecting Master. I don't care about anything else. If you want an explanation, go and do it yourselves." "Mother, father." At this moment, Imo Chao woke up. She called out and sobbed softly. Her small figure shrank into Chuanzong's embrace as she avoided Zhen Kong with a fearful gaze. A little girl had her family destroyed in just one morning. No matter how mature she was, she couldn't accept it. She even thought that she was dreaming. "Amitabha." Chuanzong looked at the unconcerned Zhen Kong and said, "Master is hungry. Imo Chao is also hungry. Go and ask for some karma." "Yes, Master." Zhen Kong didn't say anything else. He looked at the fishing village in the distance and urged the cloud to fly away. Chuanzong looked at the sky in the distance. The sun was already high up in the sky. He took a deep breath. There was a hint of nostalgia and sadness in his voice as he said, "When I was still a child, I also had a father and mother at home. They loved me very much. However, one day, when Zhang Qingshao massacred Yellow Flower Ridge, Jiang Luer was still young. Xiaohua originally thought that Jiang Luer might not know the truth. However, Jiang Luer clearly knew what happened that day. Although he didn't know who Jiang Luer learned the truth from, or if he saw it with his own eyes, he could hear from Chuanzong's mouth that Chuanzong's knowledge and the truth were somewhat different. However, Xiaohua wasn't here. Only Imo Chao, Zhen Han, and Longma Zhenfeng were listening at the side. Zhen Han and Longma Zhenfeng wanted to know Chuanzong's background from Chuanzong. Imo Chao sympathized with Chuanzong's experience. No one knew how serious the difference was. When Jianghu slowly flew back with a bamboo basket in his hand, Mo Chao's eyes were still filled with sorrow and hatred. However, the tears in her eyes had already dried up. Children from poor families were always able to adapt to life very quickly. They knew what to do when and what to do. Her parents had already been killed. What she needed to do now was to protect herself and tenaciously survive. Zhen Kong placed the bamboo basket in front of Chuanzong. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Master, I got this from the town in front. Please take a look and see if it's of any use." Chuanzong nodded and didn't answer. He removed the lining cloth on the bamboo basket and saw that there were some date cakes and other things that looked very pretty. A burst of heat and fragrance floated from the bamboo basket. Chuanzong didn't feel anything, but Mo Chao's stomach rumbled. Chuanzong picked up a date cake and placed it next to Mo Chao's mouth. He said kindly, "You eat." "Master, eat first." Mo Chao raised his hand and pushed it to Chuanzong's mouth without hesitation. "Master has been enlightening me for a long time. I'm sure you're already hungry." "Okay." Chuanzong saw that Mo Chao was so sensible and felt a little guilty. He picked up another piece and gave it to Mo Chao. "Let's eat together." At this moment, Chuanzong didn't look like a monk at all. He was no different from a kind big brother. Mo Chao grinned and forced a smile. "Okay, master." After Mo Chao wolfed down the date cake, Chuanzong slowly ate a few mouthfuls. Before Chuanzong could do anything, Zhen Kong flicked his finger and a jujube cake flew out of the basket and landed in Liao Chao's hand. Liao Chao was startled and its small body shrank back into Chuanzong's kasaya. Zhen Kong looked at Mo Chao's fearful eyes and said faintly, "Master, disciple has thought about it on the way here. Disciple has gone a little overboard today." However, disciple was only trying to protect master. The situation was urgent. Disciple doesn't know what you're thinking. However, since it has already happened, it's useless for disciple to say anything. "Master, do as you see fit." After saying that, Zhen Kong's figure flashed and landed on the hillside. He no longer paid attention to Chuanzong. "Amit ba." Seeing that Zhen Kong was remorseful but his mouth was still unyielding, Chuanzong chanted Buddha's name. He couldn't eat the remaining date cake. "Master, hurry up and eat." Chuanzong Kusuma put down the date cake and hurriedly said, "Eat until you're full so that you can go on your way." Chuanzong placed the date cake back into the bamboo basket and forced a smile. "When you're done eating, this monk will send you home. Alright, who else is in your family?" At the mention of family, Mo Chao's small mouth twitched again. Tears fell from his eyes and he sobbed as he replied, "There's no one else in my family. Young benefactor, do you have any relatives in the village?" Chuanzong felt bitter and asked again. However, before Mo Chao could reply, Zhen Kong, who was sitting on the hillside, suddenly jumped up from the ground. He waved the magic wand in his hand and hurriedly said, "Damn it, there's no end to this. You two hurry up and protect master." Zhen Han was also shocked. He hurriedly flew over from afar and waved the weapon in his hand. His eyes flashed as he looked in the direction where Zhen Kong was facing. Chapter 4566. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng was as lazy as before. However, he also turned around to look, wanting to know which shameless demon or Taoist cultivator had come to court death this time. However, when they saw the demon flying over from afar, they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. This was because another identical Zhen Kong was carrying a peach tree on his shoulder and stepping on a demon cloud. He had a gloomy expression on his face as he flew back. The second Zhen Kong was clearly a little absent-minded and didn't release his origin will to investigate. Instead, the first Zhen Kong rushed into the sky and roared furiously, "Damned demon! You actually dared to transform into my appearance and come over. See if I don't kill you." Zhen Kong shuddered and looked in disbelief at the Zhen Kong who looked exactly like him standing in front of him. He hurriedly shouted, "Master!" When the second Zhen Kong saw that Chuanzong was safe and sound, he threw the peach tree on the ground and roared furiously, "Damned demon, you actually dared to transform into my appearance and come over. See if I don't kill you." When the second Zhen Kong finished speaking, he was stunned. Not only were his words exactly the same as the first Zhen Kong, His tone was also exactly the same. Even he himself couldn't tell the difference. Demon, hit as usual. The first Zhen Kong roared and waved his magic wand at the second Zhen Kong. The second Zhen Kong was also furious. He roared and waved his magic wand. Demon, hit as usual. Oh my, there are actually 2 second senior brothers. Dragon Horse Jinfeng laughed and said, which monster race is this? Actually transforming into a fire ape? Is he really not afraid of death? Then, Dragon Horse Jinfeng released his origin will and swept it across the 2 Zhen Kongs. Interesting. Zhen Han sneered. Which great sage wants to pluck the peaches this time? Did he get the approval of the Immortal Palace and the Thunder Monastery? Naturally, Zhen Han sneered and, like Dragon Horse Jinfeng, used the clear eyes technique to look at the 2 Zhen Kongs. The dragon and the human were fine, but after looking at each other for a while, their expressions changed greatly. The 2 of them looked at each other with fear in their eyes. Neither of them dared to say another word. That was because the 2 Zhen Kongs fighting before him not only had the same magic wand and the same techniques, even their strength was exactly the same. In fact, the 2 Zhen Kongs couldn't even be distinguished by the clear vision light and origin sense. However, the dragon and man pondered for a moment and immediately understood that there was definitely something wrong with Zhen Kong, who had returned earlier, because it was impossible for the previous Zhen Kong to give in. It was even more impossible for him to have come from the town to beg for alms. Only the Zhen Kong who came back later, the one who followed his temper and brought back from a peach tree in the mountains, could be the real Zhen Kong. But now, the 2 Zhen Kongs were fighting. Who knew which one was the Zhen Kong that returned first and which one was the Zhen Kong that came later? Moreover, when they thought about the control worm that appeared in the fishing village and the grass in Chun Zhang's arms, Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng shuddered. The trap that they had set for Zhen Kong was definitely not small. A demon with such thoughts and the ability to transform into Zhen Kong's appearance was definitely not someone they could deal with. Moreover, the sutra seeking extreme bliss had already reached its end after 200 years of suffering. Which demon would dare to come over and blatantly pluck the peaches at this time? If they didn't have a powerful background, Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. Shrinking their necks, the dragon and man seemed to have felt a cold wind blowing on their bodies and felt somewhat cold. You too deserve to die. At this moment, one of the Zhen Kong shouted, why aren't you coming over to help me? Come over quickly. The other Zhen Kong also shouted, this demon is troublesome. His strength is actually on par with me. If you don't come over to help, I won't be able to kill him. Hearing this, Zhen Han immediately jumped into the air and opened his mouth. Sword chi was about to fly out, but the flying sword only flew out half a chi. Zhen Han was once again in a difficult position and said in a low voice, second senior brother, this little brother really wants to help you. But this little brother doesn't know which one is the real you. The dragon horse Zhen Feng also jumped into the air and said in agreement, that's right. This little brother doesn't know which one is the real one. How can I help you? If I help this demon kill second senior brother, wouldn't our sutra seeking extreme bliss become a joke? Saying this, the dragon horse Zhen Feng turned his head and shouted, don't you think so, master? Chun Zhang was naturally not stupid. The moment he saw the 2 Zhen Kongs, he immediately understood what was going on. However, he was currently the same as Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng, dumbfounded, because he was unable to differentiate the 2 Zhen Kongs. Which one was the real Zhen Kong? He is the fake Zhen Kong. One Zhen Kong shouted. He opened his mouth and spat out a flame. The other Zhen Kong also shouted, you are the fake Zhen Kong. Saying this, he also spat out a flame. The strangest thing was that when the 2 flames collided, they were extinguished at the same time. You dare to secretly learn this daddy's magic? See if this daddy doesn't beat you to death. One Zhen Kong shouted and raised his magic wand again, while the other Zhen Kong also shouted, you dare to secretly learn this daddy's magic? See if this daddy doesn't beat you to death. The 2 Zhen Kongs fought in the air again. Seeing that they didn't need to help, Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng cleverly descended from the air. Zhen Han held the crescent moon spade and stood on one side of Chunzong while the dragon horse Zhen Feng swung his tail and stood on the other side. They seemed to be rather loyal. The two Zhen Kongs fought from the sky to the ground, then from the ground to the sea, and then from the sea to the sky. Not only were the winds and clouds surging in the sky, even the calm surface of the sea was gradually surging with huge waves. The two Zhen Kongs were still unable to determine the victor. Seeing the scorching sun in the sky, the two Zhen Kongs knew that there wouldn't be any conclusion if they continued to fight like this. They both waved their magic wands and descended from the sky. However, the two Zhen Kongs seemed to have a tacit understanding and landed a bit far from Chunzong. The two Zhen Kongs stabbed their magic wands towards the ground and shouted, "Master, quickly tell us, which one is the fake Zhen Kong and which one is the real Zhen Kong?" Chunzong helplessly looked at the two identical Zhen Kongs and said, "Master's eyes are mortal, how can I tell them apart?" Saying this, Chunzong turned his head and asked Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng, "Disciples, which one do you think is the real Zhen Kong?" "Master, we really can't tell." Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng replied in unison, "Actually, Master can ask some secrets that only you and second senior brother know, damn it." Without waiting for Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng to finish speaking, the two Zhen Kongs cursed together. "Since it's a secret, how can Master ask it in person? If the fake Zhen Kong heard it, wouldn't he know?" That's right, Master, please don't ask." Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng realized and hurriedly said to Chunzong, "Let's wait for eldest senior brother to come back first." "All right, it seems like we can only wait for Zhenjie to come back first." Chunzong could only place his hopes on Zhenjie, who was sleeping somewhere. However, they waited for more than half a day. Seeing that the sun was about to set, they still didn't see the shadow of that pig. Because of the fight between the two Zhen Kongs, the fishermen in the fishing village didn't dare to leave the village. Around the fishing village, there were some shelves made of withered branches. Most of them had fishing nets on them. These fishing nets were supposed to be put away last night, but because of the arrival of Chunzong and the others, as well as the battle between Zhenjie and the three demon kings, most of them weren't put away. At this moment, these shelves had collapsed due to the strong wind, and the fishing nets were scattered on the beach. Far away on the beach, there were some small boats. Originally, when the tide rose this morning, the fishermen in the fishing village would go out to sea as usual. However, because of the fight between the two Zhen Kongs, the fishermen didn't go out to sea. When the tide rose, some fishing boats were dragged by the seawater and drifted into the sea. Together with the fishing nets from before, most of them were floating not far away from the beach. Although these fishing boats and fishing nets weren't far from the beach, when the tide fell, they would probably drift into the depths of the East Sea. The owners of these boats would lose their boats, and their livelihood would be even more difficult in the future. Looking at the two identical Zhen Kongs staring at each other like fighting cocks, ready to fight at any time, Chunzong sighed and once again looked at the distant sea. A layer of darkness appeared in the depths of the sea. Chunzong, who had already passed through the East Sea 3 times, knew that a storm was coming. "Master," Xiao Chao said in a low voice, "there will be a storm tonight. If we don't put away the fishing boats now, they will turn into wood chips tomorrow morning." "Amitba." Chunzong sighed and said, "Even at this time, young benefactor is still thinking about others. You are really kind." "Master," Dragon Horse Zhen Feng called from the side, "let's find a place to hide from the rain. Who knows when eldest martial brother will come back this time? It's not the first time he went out to slack off. If the wind is calm, he might come back tomorrow. Now that there is a storm, he must be at the bottom of the sea somewhere." Chunzong pondered for a moment. What Dragon Horse Zhen Feng said was the truth. Zhenjie was loyal to Chunzong, but he was also very lazy. When they first came down from the snowy mountain, he was fine, lying on Dragon Horse Zhenfeng's back to sleep every day. Later, Zhenjie felt uncomfortable on Dragon Horse Zhenfeng's back, so he would find excuses to go out and fight demons from time to time. This fight would take at most 10 days, and at least a few days. However, at that time, Zhen Kong was there, so Chunzong didn't feel that there was much difference. But now that Zhen Kong was in trouble, Zhenjie went out to slack off. This small matter was a big deal. "Let's go." Chunzong stood up and said, "Let's go first. Don't block the fishermen's livelihood. If we don't go out to sea, I'm afraid that some families will be in trouble." "Yes, master." The two Jinkongs answered at the same time, very habitually. Damn it. The two Jinkongs, who had just rested for a while, were furious again. With a loud shout, they started to fight again. Chapter 45-67. Chunzong was helpless and could only say to Zhenhan, "Disciple, go and pick up the fishing boats and nets scattered in the sea. Don't let them drift with the waves." "Master." Zhenhan looked at the two Jinkongs fighting and said nervously, "Right now, I still can't tell which one is real and which one is fake. Disciple has to protect your safety and can't leave without permission." "Che." Longma Zhenfeng sneered. "It's obvious that the one who came back first is fake. If he wanted to harm Master, he would have made a move already. Why wait until now?" I think the one who came back later is fake." Zhenhan snorted. "Zhenfeng, you are from the dragon race. Picking up fishing boats and nets from the sea is your specialty. You should be the one doing this." "But," Longma Zhenfeng spat, "I am the 10th prince of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. How can I do such a trivial thing? If the other princes of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace were to know about this, how can I still keep my face?" "You are already being ridden by a pig. What face do you still want?" Zhenhan retorted. However, he immediately looked at Chunzong, who was walking towards the sea, and shouted, "Master, what are you doing?" "Amitba. Master is going to do such a trivial thing," Chunzong said without turning his head back. "Io, master, don't be anxious. Disciple was just joking with junior brother." How could Zhenhan dare to let Chunzong go to the sea? He hurriedly said and flew above the sea. He raised his hand and grabbed the fishing boats and nets several li away. With a wave of his hand, he was about to throw them to the beach. Chunzong saw this and hurriedly shouted, "Disciple, be careful. Don't break these fishing boats." "You are really long-winded." Although Zhenhan was impatient, he still restrained his temper and flew to the beach and put down the fishing boats and nets. After one more grab, the entire surface of the sea was cleaned. Zhenhan's face was a little pale as she gasped for breath and said, "Master, Disciple was fortunate enough to not disappoint you." "Amazing. Third senior brother is really amazing." Longma Zhenfeng raised his hoof and praised with admiration. "Gosh," Chunzong looked at the little girl and asked, "We should be on our way. This penniless monk will send you back to the fishing village." "But," Liao Chao blinked and said, "Master, if you send me back, I will starve to death." "How is this possible?" Zhenhan sneered. "Although there are only 40 to 50 families in this small fishing village, there are still over 100 people. Wouldn't having a little girl like you mean having an extra pair of chopsticks? Besides, don't you know how to pick up seafood on the beach? Even if you were at home, would they just watch you starve to death?" Mao Chao opened her mouth but didn't know how to explain. After a while, she pointed in the direction of the fishing village and said, "Before the new year, there was a guy called Smelly Fish in our village. His parents went out to sea and didn't come back. He disappeared after that." "Amitba." Chuanjue chanted the name of Buddha. Zhuachao's worries are not unfounded. These fishermen only relied on fishing for a living, and even a family of 3 might have problems filling their stomachs. How could they spare the energy to adopt a little girl? Not to mention Zhuachao living alone. Who knows what kind of ancient people she would meet? In this era, people can only live for themselves. Conscience is about to disappear. This is also the reason why Master wants to bring the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures to the hidden immortal continent, so that under the illumination of Buddha's light, the world can become one. "Master, do as you wish," Zhenhan casually replied. "Zhenfeng." Chuanjue spoke again, "Come here." "Yes, master," Zhenfeng replied. Just as he took 2 steps forward, he suddenly realized something and cried out in shock. "Monk, what are you doing?" "Amitba, Zhuachao is still a child. Master wants to take her away, so naturally I have to ride on your body," Chuanjue replied indifferently. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng quickly retreated and shouted, "How can this be? I am the 10th prince of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. How many people in this world can ride on my body? It is already good enough for me to become your disciple. You actually want a secular girl to ride on my body? You are humiliating me, humiliating my Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. Master? Zhen Han also frowned and said, if this Wuxiao is a boy, then so be it. We can just bring her along. She is a girl. Although she is young, she is still a girl. I am afraid that it will be inconvenient to bring her along, right? That's right. Dragon Horse Zhen Feng retreated far away and shouted, Monk, if you do this, you will make that Eastern Sea conch girl who is infatuated with you sad. Amit ba. Chuanjue replied, Master will bring Wuxiao along first. When we reach the city, I will find an honest family or a nunnery and let her stay there. Not good, not good. Zhen Han said anxiously, how can there be an honest family in this world? If Master leaves, who knows how they will treat Wuxiao? A nunnery is even worse. Wuxiao is still so young. How can she become a nun? Amit ba, then I will leave this matter to you. Chuanjue smiled and said, the hidden Immortal continent is the foundation of Confucian cultivators. The Immortal Palace must have a place to settle the old, the young, the sick, and the disabled. Since Sutra seeking in extreme bliss has the merit of Confucian cultivators, then Wuxiao should also be one of the merit. Monk, you set a trap for me. Zhen Han was startled and became somewhat angry. Chuanjue was not angry and said indifferently, Amit ba, if the Immortal Palace is selling dog meat under false pretenses, then you naturally don't have to do it. With that, Chuanjue pulled Wuxiao's hand and said, Wuxiao, follow this poor monk. Yes, master. Wuxiao was very obedient. She stood up and looked at the fishing boat not far away with reluctance. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, she closed her mouth. Chuanjue was very attentive. After walking a few steps, he saw Wuxiao's sad expression and woke up. He turned around and brought Wuxiao to the fishing boat. Master, what are you doing? Dragon Horse Zhen Feng asked hurriedly. Zhen Feng, you go and tidy up the scriptures. Carry the scriptures and other things on your body first. Chuanjue instructed, Zhen Han, you go with Master to the fishing village and tidy up the things in Wuxiao's house. After all, this is Wuxiao's house. Don't let her grow up and forget the things in her house. Thank you, Master. Wuxiao heard this and tears flowed down her cheeks. No. Zhen Han wanted to say that he didn't want to go, but seeing Chuanjue's firm steps, he knew that he couldn't stop him. He thought for a moment and said, Master, you wait here. Wuxiao, come with me. With that, Chuanjue raised his hand and took Wuxiao into his hand. He stepped on a cloud and impatiently flew to the sky above the fishing village. When Wuxiao pointed at the straw hut, Chuanjue waved his hand and put the entire straw hut into his Jianghu bag. The fishermen in the fishing village were all afraid and hid in their houses, not daring to come out. Wuxiao saw Chuanjue's divine ability and her eyes lit up. She hurriedly shouted, Uncles, I am Wuxiao. My parents were killed by demons and unfortunately met with misfortune. I met a kind monk and they promised to take me to another place to settle down. You don't have to worry. When I grow up, I will come back to see you. Chuanjue was extremely impatient, but after hearing Wuxiao's words, he couldn't help but look at Wuxiao. After all, this child at such a young age was more meticulous than his age. It was indeed rare. However, Chuanjue didn't think too much about it. After flying back, he told Chuanjue. Chuanjue nodded with a smile. He held his staff in one hand and the little Wuxiao in the other. He looked at the direction, then looked at the two Zhenkongs who were still fighting in the sky and left. Who is the real one? Who dares to steal my merit? Longma Zhen Feng carried the scripture on his back and looked at the battle in confusion. However, after a moment, he shook his tail and sneered, What does this have to do with me? My merit won't be any less. After saying that, Longma Zhen Feng followed behind Chuanjue. However, after a moment, Longma Zhen Feng cursed, Damn it! Why aren't there two chastity rings? This scripture is as light as a feather compared to the chastity rings. Behind Longma Zhen Feng, Chuanjue's voice came again. Even if there are two chastity rings, won't you still have to carry whoever is killed? Longma Zhenfeng snorted and said with a smile, what if the fake one kills the real one and the fake one isn't lazy? Maybe he won't ride on my back and show off his prowess? You're dreaming. Chuanjua sneered, how can the fake kill the real one? Do you think that there are so many 8th grade peak elemental energy experts in this world who would come and join in the fun? That's right. Longma Zhenfeng was also interested and said in a low voice, Chuanjue, between the two Zhenkongs, which one is the real one and which one is the fake one? Nonsense, the one who came back first is the fake one, the one who came back later is the real one. Chuanjue replied without thinking. Longma Zhenfeng was displeased, you're the one who's talking nonsense. Can't you have a nice chat? The night is long and the stars are shining brightly. Don't you want to talk about the biggest secret of immortals, Buddhas, and demons? What's there to talk about? Chuanjue sneered, we're all chess pieces. Fate is never in the hands of chess pieces. No, you don't understand what I mean. Longma Zhenfeng laughed. What I mean is, between the two Zhenfengs, one is the real one and the other is the fake one. Or are both the real one and the fake one? Why did he appear at this time? Oh, Zhenfeng, what do you mean? Chuanjue's curiosity was piqued and she asked curiously, quickly say it. We just came out from the Eastern Sea. Could it be that you got some news? Guesses are guesses. Third senior brother, you can't slander me. Longma Zhenfeng was somewhat displeased. Although I came from the Eastern Sea, I didn't see the dragon race from the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. I didn't even see a single marine race from the Dragon Palace. Eldest senior brother can testify to this.